Sword of Coming Chapter 956. The Wild World Jianghu. A pavilion with sharp points on all sides, the plaque UMA. The sky leaks and the moon is sparse and the ground wind is mixed. A middle-aged scribe in a blue shirt and long gown wearing a jasper crown gently clenched his fist, holding two black and white chess pieces in his hand, creaking. As the cultivator of Jianghu Kiching began to think, inside this pavilion, there was a vision in the weather, but there was not the slightest air of heaven and earth rushing out of the pavilion. First, there was a string of golden words floating up. How about the first sentence, the second sentence, and the third sentence? Soon, because of these dozens of words, there was a thunderous sound in the pavilion. The blue brick ground was like land, and the blue brick pattern was like hydrology, setting off waves. What a secret heart seal of the Buddhism Zen line. Do you want to know the wind of my family? On one of the blue bricks that looked like a continent of mountains and rivers, the wind and waves suddenly stopped. In the clear sky, there seemed to be two monks as small as mustard seeds climbing up the mountain. I asked the teacher how to teach the pedestrian birdway. What is the birdway without trial? The old monk strode like a meteor, walks like flying, walking on the steep mountain road like walking on the ground, hearing the words, smiling and saying four words, not one person. On the way to the mountain, the two monks met the Dao Bianya engraved list one by one, all of which had only one word: ancestor, yes, pro, general, and yao. Seeing the words one after the other, without making any pauses, the young monk suddenly asked what he was like. Unexpectedly, the old monk replied, no bird said. The young monk was silent. The old monk suddenly shouted, how is it a Buddha? The young monk slowly replied that the boy Bing Ding came to ask for fire. The old monk said again, kind words, Bing Ding belongs to fire and he seeks fire with fire, but unfortunately it's still not in the end. Let's talk about it. The mountain at the feet of the two monks is actually made from hundreds of millions of words in Zhang and Su Daozong. Beyond the cliffs of the Road Mountain, flying birds suddenly cut through the sky and fluttered around the mountain. The green hills began to rotate at the same time. In the end, both the rotating hills and the birds seemed to be still, so it was called the disease of arrow. When there was no end, the two monks who climbed up without noticing the mountain turned like a bird hanging in the air. Arrow. The young monk was silent, and the old monk sighed, revealing under the eaves. The young monk has a sharp heart for a moment, asking and answering himself, how is he a Buddha? Boy Bing Ding came to ask for fire. The old monk nodded lightly, stomped heavily on the ground, and finally said with a smile, Mo Lu robbed. After finally trying to understand something, this middle-aged scribe, who has been practicing in Jianghu for many years, put more thoughts on the vast sea of Buddhist theory of sutras and laws. Outside the pavilion, the female city lord of Jianghu City, she came slowly. After stopping, she looked for a moment. Because the Sir did not deliberately cover up the scene, she was able to see the strange people in the pavilion, and waited for the Sir. Turning her head and looking at herself, she was very polite and gave a blessing. She smiled and asked softly, Sir, what is this? The lord of the city, xianxia, named Xuanhu, is a female cultivator of the fairyland demon race. She actually owns a robe water refining, of the rank of immortal soldiers. It's just that there are no celebrations held in Jianghu City these years. If so, she would wear this very simple green robe banana leaf, with a light makeup. The Jianghu Chinka, who was called Mr. by Qingjiazuan, stood up and smiled and said, I have nothing to do, just think about it, chat to relieve boredom. The surname was changed and he was a monk from a foreign country. He has been serving as a guest clerk in Jianghu for nearly 100 years. He has lived in simplicity and almost never shows his face. Even Qingjia's direct disciple never knew that Jianghu had such an odd figure. Correction occasionally went out quietly for a long journey, never greeted Qingjia, and she never asked. Qingjia said sincerely, Mister, don't have to care about red tape. The rule of the world is to set the rules for us laymen. Why use Mr. S pedagogy to study nature and humans? The middle-aged scribe smiled and said, when you go to the countryside, you can't give up courtesy. Qingjia sincerely praised, Mr. Self-discipline has an autumnal spirit. The middle-aged scribe shook his head and said, you can be called a gentleman if you are not a scholar who has read a few books. As soon as the husband said, it was actually earlier than the scholars of ancient times, and had a bigger meaning, and it was comparable to the Taoist. Qingjia always stood obediently at the bottom of the steps of the pavilion, and asked tentatively, I don't have anything to ask my husband today. Can I sit in the pavilion? On both shoulders of the female cultivator were a thrush bird and a flower and tree called the Weaver Mother. Privately, Qingjia always respectfully called the changed pseudonym Mr. without adding a surname. Besides, the real master of Jin Suiqing was not her anymore. It's just that the truth that makes Xianxia feel fun, rather than fear, is that unless she sees the gentleman in the pavilion with her own eyes, all her memories of this person are like being locked in something. Inside the room as the master, she doesn't have the key. The key is only in the hands of this gentleman. So even she herself didn't know about it, so who could know the truth in the whole barren world? Xianxia finds it very interesting, just like a young girl who is in love with her, hiding a secret she doesn't want to share with anyone. Being able to use the Dao Xian of a fairyland cultivator seems to be completely playing with the applause. I am afraid that even the peak cultivator of the Ascension realm would not dare to say that he can do it. It's incredible. And the female fairy Xuanhu of Jinquiching is not a soft character, just a fairyland and no ancestor can rely on. She is not good at fighting by nature, and can protect hundreds of female repairs and repair gold. Suiqing, you can know that Xuanhu Dao Xian must be extremely tough. The middle-aged scribes did not remove the vision of the pavilion either, and said with a smile, "Of course it's the guest." Hearing this, Xianxia bit her lip, her eyes that are extremely agile Qiu Shui, both resentful and charming. She climbed up the stairs, picked up the skirt corners and entered the pavilion. Only when she noticed the vastness of the small pavilion, she cautiously walked around some green bricks on the ground, and finally sat opposite the gentleman. A woman immortal who has moved the world is sitting right now like facing a teacher in a school. After Xianxia took her seat, she showed a somewhat humiliating look and laughed at herself. "Mister, just think about it, and the conclusion that we can reach may be the mystery that the dull generations of us can't understand in our entire life." The middle-aged scribe shook his head and said, "The Xuanhu Taoist fellow is ridiculous. The more knowledge a person has, the greater the unknown. The ordinary master lies in knowing what, and the cultivator lies in knowing what he doesn't know." Xianxia was speechless. The middle-aged scribe, sitting upright, smiling warmly, but in front of Xianxia the other party is a godlike god. No way, the person in front of him is the Baidi City Zhengzhong who dared to kill in Toyua Mountain and could kill casually in Toyua Mountain. Xianxia wanted to speak but stopped. As she herself said, she didn't intend to talk about business matters, but waited until she entered the pavilion and sat face to face with Zheng Juzhong, as if she didn't say anything she would feel a little violent. As for the two monks in the pavilion, Xiao Xiandi, who continue to climb and talk, Xianxia is watching it for nothing, and listening is for nothing. Xianxia forcibly suppressed the thought in his mind and changed the subject, which was also a question that had been curiosity in his mind for a long time. "Dare to ask, mister, what do you think is really interesting?" Zheng Juzhong smiled and said, "A lot. For example, in a blessed place of medium rank, Zheng Juzhong once allowed a certain self to start from scratch, from a weak scholar with no power to bind a chicken, to become a successful assisting emperor to dominate the world in just 20 years. Military division. At the same time, two brand new identities were added, one of which was a reckless Kusano with an excellent martial arts talent, and he rose to the ground. The other one became a gas trainer on the mountain with a mediocre aptitude for cultivation, and became a political strategist after going down the mountain. Each of the three has a potential main line of thought, leading them to different paths, and they are responsible for three things: creation, destruction, and repair." Zheng Juzhong looked down at the top of the mountain, and suddenly said, "Friends of Xuanhu Taoist, it is time to make a long-term plan for Jin Suiqing." Xianxia was relieved and said in a deep voice, "I hope you can enlighten me. Jin Qiqing's situation in the wild world is similar to Jiuquan sect. The foundations of the two Zongzi heads are the refining of the robe and the brewing of the immortal brew. From the outside world, Jin Suiqing was protected by Yangji because he once helped the old throne demon to raise his rank by raising the ink-colored dragon robe by one level. The big demon rarely invades Jin Shui City, but it is not the whole fact. Yangji does add blue eyes to Qingjia, but he still wants to annex it. As a cornucopia of wealth, the reason why nothing happens is Qingjia. Adhering to his own opinion, even hesitating to say something ruthless, but he didn't have the same knowledge as Qingjia because he didn't have the same knowledge as Qingjia. Anyway, it was bitter and not worthy of outsiders. Due to the high refining threshold of Jinquicheng's robes, it is difficult to mass-produce it on a large scale. The sects including Jinquicheng and Xiandancheng in the previous attack on Haoran City were all used to destroy wealth and eliminate disasters, and gave a large amount of fairy money. And Jin Suiqing also emptied the secret vault to store the 1,000-year-old robes, and delivered them to Jiazizang at a discount. Therefore, no monk appeared on the battlefield on the side of the Great Wall of Jianqi and Jin Suiqing. And the city lord Qingjia only appeared during the discussion of Toyue Mountain, and confronted the great monk who had participated in the discussion of the Confucian temple. In fact, at that time, the sight of the female fairy of Jianghu was not a few, of course. It was also because of the refining water robe on her body that divided the yin and yang, had the sun and the moon, and had the aura of the avenue of stars and stars. Zheng Zhuzhong glanced at the female immortal, nodded and said, "Tao Ting Taoist fellow's suggestion, the general direction is right. Seeing humanity and checking memory are like flipping through a book." Qingjia didn't feel any discomfort but asked, "In the opinion of Mr. Jianghu can stand upright for thousands of years because it has two so-called backers, namely Yangji in the bright place and the wild peach pavilion in the dark. It's a pity that the old throne big demon stood up and failed to return to the wilderness. It was blocked by Lu Qi and was already imprisoned by the Confucian temple. Tao Ting had also been a watchdog in the 100,000 mountains for many years, and now it is in the Howren world and it has changed. Become the tender Taoist who became famous in Yuanyangzu in one fell swoop. Therefore, one of the direct disciples of the great ancestor of Tuoyue Mountain, the new makeup of the great demon who is also a female cultivator, had previously asked Jianghu to surrender the secret method and tactics of refining the robes. There is no room for bargaining in Jianghu. In exchange, Tuoyue Mountain allowed Jinsui City to choose two places at will to build two xianxia. For Qingjia, what is the significance of such flashy benefits? It is meaningless at all. Even if Jianghu stood up to the next sect, it could not hold it back. The descendants of Jianghu were all female cultivators. Apart from refining the robes, they didn't know how to fight with others at all. So Tao Ting had previously secretly sent an extremely concealed secret letter. Generally speaking, it is nothing more than implying Qingjia, xuanhuan and others. It's better to move Jinquiqing to Howren world, where you can have a meal and eat together, and both parties can take care of it. Tao Ting slapped his chest in the letter and promised that when he got there, he didn't dare to say that Jianghu would be better. He only said to maintain the current family business and ask the Confucian temple for a clan identity. To Tao Ting, Jianghu Qingjia is just a little girl who belongs to half of her younger generation. Because if Jianghu goes back to the top, there are two Dao lines, one is similar to the authentic tradition, and the other belongs to the secret transmission of the side door. Tao Ting and Qingjia, a certain hidden preacher, do have very stories and they can't be called. It's a bit ugly to say that it's a concubine. And this preacher of Qingjia who was not included in the genealogy of Jianghu once left a will for Jianghu, saying that in that round of bright moon and bright color, there was an ancient existence of Qingjia who could call the supreme master according to his generation. But when will I see this patriarch, the specific time? Maybe just wait patiently. Qingjia originally thought that Jinshui City could have an extra towering backing. As a result, a bright moon in the sky was directly repaired by those swordsmen who were still in the shadows of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. How can she still recognize her ancestors? It's just disappointment and a bit of ease. After all, there is already a Mr. Zheng in Jinsui City who is willing to entrust his life and death. Maybe it was a disaster. The Dai dynasty in the Aquarius Island battlefield once raided all the robes from Jinquiqing, but unfortunately failed to capture several Jinquiqing's primary monks who were proficient in refining techniques. 300 years ago, the city lord Xuanhu became a fairy. In addition to Yangji personally attend the ceremony. Tao Ting also sneaked out of Xuanhuan Dashan. There is a clear record of this in the secret files of the Summer Palace. Obviously, the Howren world and the Wild World are already in an arrow-like situation, and wars are likely to break out at any time, and Jianghu, if it is not for Mr. Zheng, there is actually no choice at all, either actively relying on Yueshan or being taken by Howren. Break through and become a prisoner. Qingjia found that this gentleman seemed to be absent, and she did not dare to disturb the other's wanderings, and waited patiently for the following. Zheng Zhuzhong quickly came back to his senses, only to say something concise to her. It is nothing more than replacing Tuyueshan's new makeup with the Zhongtu Confucian temple. Jianghu took the initiative to have the price and take root in Fuyao Island, and then in another continent. Similar to Aizhao, choose a site as the next clan. Qingjia obviously had no objection to this, and did not have any look of surprise. The number of wild sects suitable for the Howren soil and water are few, and it happens that Jinquiqing is among them. She cautiously asked, how to move all the properties of Jinquiqing? What about it? Choose a monk? Zheng Zhuzhong said, just follow me. About Mo was worried that the other party would not understand him. Zheng Zhuzhong explained with a smile, the whole Jinsui city has been refined by me to become a life thing. In order to hide from Tuoyue Mountain and not show the horse's feet, it will hurt the Taoist friends in Xuanhu. It really took me a lot of time. The reason why Zheng Juzhong was distracted just now was because he was thinking about a digression with both parties. In this matter, Zheng Juzhong only talked with Cui Yang. The views of the two parties are similar. Under the leadership of the cultivators, the spiritual beings will pave the way and build bridges and go out into the sky. This is a way out visible to the naked eye. The stars out of the sky should be used as bridges or Zongmen enclaves. As long as the chessboard is big enough, you can break away from the battle of victory and defeat and reduce the internal consumption of the entire established world. It may be led by the human race and sincerely cooperate with the monks of all races to choose a livable place and thrive in those stars outside the sky. However, it is far from enough to have this road through the sky, which is difficult to say for the time being a brand new way or an old way. Just in case, it is necessary to use an unprecedented path to go in. Letting all beings in heaven and earth have another way to live is a retreat that must be planned early. Embroidered tiger Cui Huang spent his knowledge and finally created a porcelain man, just to stay in the middle with Zheng and also to prove this just-in-case terrible accident. The ready-made example is here, you three. It's not easy to ignore it. Zheng Juzhong is sure that if the human race neither finds a way out nor finds a way out that is sufficient to protect itself, then sooner or later, it will be destroyed by itself. It's like the gods who used to be aloof, destroying all beings on the earth created by their own hands. Every one of ourselves that we dare not admit. It was a trapped beast in a wandering cage and is sitting high in the hall. Most of the so-called Taoist scholars do not know the so-called Li Jiao to call the ancestors. The root of Li Jiao is only to do and what the ancestors ask for. The eyes are not high and the hands are naturally lower. They are destined to reach out of the curtain. In the pavilion, one was thinking about the life and death of Jin Suiqing. One is considering the life and death of the whole beings with spirits. Probably this is the difference. No wonder Sun Daochang would say with a smile, the gap between people is bigger than the gap between people and pigs. Zheng Juzhong waved his sleeves, put away the vision in the pavilion, bent his fingers and tapped the pavilion pillar lightly. The key to woodwork in the world is mortise and tenon. At home portal. In a foreign school. Practice in the mountains. What is the link between people's hearts? Zheng Juzhong stood up, smiled and said, "We are all one lamp, bright and dark between heaven and earth. Words and deeds are mortises and tenons for each other, and the hearts of the people make lights together. Build houses and hold a group for warmth." After that, Zheng Juzhong took the lead out of Yueme Pavilion and took Qingjia for a walk in Jinsui City. During the heavy snow season, Jinsui City's palaces were extremely magnificent, as beautiful as the realm of colored glaze. Qingjia, who was following Zheng Juzhong, was unable to perform Taoism, so she hid her figure together. In the palace hall, there is a girl with a snake bun, standing on her toes, stretching her waist and holding her hands. The long pole hit the ice and there was a string of broken jade falling on the ground, and the laughter of the girls was tactfully like Yingyan. Walking out of the palace, Zheng Juzhong took Qingjia to a moat outside Jinsui City. The river was wide and the ice was frozen under the bridge. Many children rushed to play on it. Zheng Juzhong walked along the river to the upper reaches and came to a riverside dam. His feet were piled up with long and thin stones, densely packed everywhere, and glutinous rice slurry was poured between the stones, and then he was tamped with iron and tenon. Like fish scales layered on top of each other and like the skinny old man. Zheng Juzhong has been curious all these years, how did Qi Jingchun do it in Liju Cave and what did Qi Jingchun see? What really makes Zheng Juzhong find interesting is that someone has done something that he still can't do no matter how hard he is. There are big and small things, but in Zhengju Center, there is not necessarily a difference between superior and inferior. If a piece of snowflake money on the mountain can only be converted into 100 taels of silver under the mountain, what will the world situation be like? For another example, suddenly all three kinds of fairy money disappeared between heaven and earth, how will the situation develop? I heard that when Cui Yang was young, there was a family elder who was not allowed to read novels about jianghu romance and genius and beauty. And Cui Yang is not allowed to play chess, because he thinks that smart people are easily obsessed with it, spend a lot of time in vain, delay studying and do not do business. Qingjia turned her head to look at Mr. Zheng. After a while, she laughed to herself and boldly asked, "Sir, how do you think about love between men and women? Excuse me, does your husband have a favorite girl?" Zheng Juzhong smiled and shook his head. Qingjia has never had a Taoist partner in her life, and she doesn't feel that she needs to find a Taoist partner, but she has a very fond of a direct disciple who follows her close friend, a family from the Yaoguan Lane who is a junior. Then shouted a group of familiar female nuns and rode in a very well-established carriage. The Yingying, Yanyan and Yanyan who had their backgrounds traveled north to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. I saw the young hidden official in the bright red robe, and the chariot was hit by a thunder, so he didn't run in vain. Successfully met the young hermit who was famous all over the world. Make them excited, the same look and feel. Just 2 words, so handsome. After returning to his hometown, Qingjia's protégé passed on to death, fascinated, as if stunned. Zheng Juzhong said with an indifferent expression, "A person of is like holding a torch and walking against the wind, and there is bound to be the risk of burning his hands." Qingjia didn't dare to ask anything more. Zheng Juzhong walked slowly. At the tattoo ferry crossing earlier, the other one himself, and Sui Chu Gong Wu Shuangjiang, the 2 sides did indeed meet. The vast world of Baidi City, the Qingming world, is exempted from the palace. Both are recognized as the 2 places with the strongest control over the sect, and all the monks respect their respective sect masters like gods. At that time, Zheng Juzhong said straightforwardly, "Palace Master Wu shouldn't have come so early." Wu Shuangjiang smiled and said, "Despite the broken zeng. But since Wu Shuangjiang is still here, it means that xianhu has begun to close the net to some extent. Zheng Juzhong will shoot once in accordance with the prior agreement." At that time, Wu Shuangjiang was looking at the sky curtain on the Great Wall of Jianxi, dragged a round of bright moon to the Qingming world, and asked casually, "It seems that I can't fight?" Zheng Juzhong said, "Because Qin Pingan is still not cruel enough." In the end, Qin Pingan's choice was not too surprising. The 3 heads of Baiyujing taught Lu Qin and almost died in the hands of a dead person. Under the blue sky, in the center of the sky and the earth, there is a mountain that rises above Runyue Peak. Parting with Lin Jiangxian on the mountain road, the Bixiao cave master only left Qigu with his direct disciple Wang Yuanlu, who had just come here to worship the mountain, and the fire-burning boy from Jinjing, leaving Runyue Peak together, and went to the simple dojo in the bright moon and bright color. As a ceremony to accept his disciple, the old Taoist took out a palm-sized pocket model of the palace, threw it to Wang Yuanlu, and glanced at the little Taoist boy. "This place belongs to Wang Yuanlu, Jinjing. As long as Wang Yuanlu has no opinion, you can do it in the future. Practice alchemy inside." As for the ceremony of apprenticeship, Wang Yuanzhen, of course, wished that there would be no red tape on the mountain. Wang Yuanlu took the sacred palace site of unknown origin with both hands. It is rare and unusual beyond doubt. Xiaodaotong obeys the master's decree and dare not complain. Everyone has his own life. If envy can't come, why envy? Damn, look really greedy. The old Taoist ignored the 2 thoughtful fellows and walked into the house on his own. He just let Jinjing continue to stare at the fire of the stove's pill. By the way, let him teach Wang Yuanlu a recipe for alchemy. How much can he teach? How much you learn depends on your ability. Wang Yuanlu put the precious treasure in his sleeve and pocketed it for safety. Then he asked, "Brother Jinjing, what is the origin of this thing?" "For the sake of that, senior brother," Xiaodaotong rolled his eyes and said, "Have you heard a word?" As a result, after waiting for a long time without waiting for the following, Wang Yuanzhen was completely confused. Xiaodaotong swaggered over the threshold and sat on the bench beside the furnace. He smiled and said, "There is an old saying, Long Qianlu is a puddle and fire helps the Sun Palace. You know?" Wang Yuanlu squatted aside, shook his head and said, "I have never heard of it." Xiaodaotong sneered and said, "The frog at the bottom of the well." Wang Yuanlu smiled and didn't refute it. "It's hard to say who is the frog at the bottom of the well." Xiaodaotong continued, "According to legend, it is one of the 5 highest in ancient times." Speaking of this, Xiaodaotong hurriedly stopped talking and pointed his finger at the ceiling. "That Lushwiking is the summer palace of the ancient water god, it can only be regarded as one of them. But this Sun Palace, whose territory is it, you guess it, it's a higher rank than that of Lushwiking. According to legend, it was once one of the sword-making grounds. The monks outside knew what it was, they would only use false transmissions and false transmissions. They were all said to be broken, but they were actually there. My master is laying it here. It's a very good baby. It can be ranked in the top 5 possessions of my master. If you succeed in it, let's steal it." Wang Yuanlu said with emotion, "Brother Jinjing knows so much." Xiaodaotong stared at the flames of the pill furnace, his immature face was shining brightly by the firelight. He curled his lips and said, "There is a fart." Wang Yuanlu held sleeves with both hands and whispered softly, "It's much better than using nothing." Xiaodaotong was furious when he heard the words, mistakenly thinking that the other party was saying something strange and mocking himself, but when he turned his head, he saw a sad and sincere face. Qingming World, Ganzhou Suichu Gong. For people meet for a drink in the viewing pavilion of the highest palace in the mountain. They are now circulating a booklet written by the palace lord, in small letters, detailing the customs of the colorful world. Here you can see the crane tower and the mainstay in the middle of the river outside the crane tower, which is actually a piece of Shillong stone. A few of them are the old people of Crane Inn. In the past, an unknown crane inn was opened on the inverted mountain in the Howran world for 200 to 300 years. A small inn, hidden dragons and crouching tigers, 1 soars 2 immortals, plus 2 jade puddings. In addition to the young shopkeepers, the foreign cooks and handymen, all with pseudonyms, all have their surnames Nian, and they all travel far and wide in the awe-inspiring world. Among them, the maiden who has the pseudonym New Year, is the daughter of the palace lord Wu Shuangjiang. And that young shopkeeper was Bai Luo, who was nicknamed Xiaobai by Wu Shuangjiang. Sui Chu Gong is the second-in-chief who has full authority to handle general affairs. At this moment, except for the old guard Bailu, the other 4 are all here. The fairy Zhang Yuanbua in the Daohao cave, a white-haired old man with a rosacea nose, gently tossed the booklet that had been turned over to the couple who were flirting and cursing at the next door. In his spare time, he has nothing to do in his spare time. If he gives this old man a pot of wine and a plate of wine and dishes, he can drink for a whole day. It's like taking a sip of wine from a bowl and vomiting a large sip back into the bowl. 3 axes at the wine table, sipped a sip, squinted intoxicated and shivered. In the past, Zhang Yuanba's dojo was on the Shillong stone. Later, when a sword repairer came to Qingquan, Zhang Yuanbua took the initiative to move the site, without having to discuss matters in the Patriarch Hall. If such trivial matters need to be determined by the palace lord, it is passed on. Go out without being laughed off by outsiders. The monarch on the mountain reached out to catch the booklet, with a serious look, turning the book like flying. The pages of the book clashed. Although he read quickly, he did not dare to miss a word. After all, it was written by the palace lord. At that time, the 3,000 Taoists under the Qingming world entered the wuxia world. Nominally, Baiyujing has only 1,000 people, half the distance, and more than 400 people short of it. But in fact, Baiyujing's Tianjun immortal officials are not a small minority, and they are inextricably linked. Actually, Baiyujing's Taoist officials still account for almost half of the quota. This man's mountain Taoist couple named Xie Chuanqiao, the woman is strong in figure and her appearance is really very unfair. She likes to drink strong wine and talk horrible things. Xie Chuanqiao don't have a bamboo hairpin and drank silently. As for the Taoist companion around him, he likes to be awkward, and is simply reincarnated. For a cultivator, that kind of bed fight has a fart meaning, but since it is a Taoist companion, let him toss it as he pleases. The man handed the book to the Taoist companion next to him, and did not forget to gently squeeze the woman's greasy wrist. But Xie Chuanqiao took the book with one hand, and fell on the other's head with the other hand. The man almost beat him to the spot. Turn in circles. Zhang Yunbo frowned and said, "How come at this juncture, 7 or 8 years earlier than expected, suddenly a list of 10 people in the world popped up?" Yu Hao laughed and said, "You can toss as much as you love. Anyway, I'm not on the list, so it doesn't matter to me." While reading the book, Xie Chuanqiao said, "The key is that the Xianzhang faction stated that this list is not theirs at all, which is very mysterious. The maiden, who has the pseudonym of New Year's Window Grill, as Wu Shuangjiang's prostitute, her real name is Wu Yu. It's just that this name seems to suffer a bit. Because the homophony is not particularly beautiful, filthy, misunderstanding, no regrets. At the time when the Yin and God came out of their body, they traveled far and wide and they spanned 2 worlds. They were not complete souls. Both the real body and the Yang God stayed in Sui Chu Gong. Of course, it was protected by the palace lord Wu Shuangjiang with a certain secret method. Otherwise, with their realm, the Yin gods would not be able to stay that long on the side of the hanging mountain, and they could continue to practice. A small and exquisite rattle is hung from the waist of the young woman, with a painted drum surface, complicated paintings, stitched with dragon skin, and a peachwood handle with a red-lined glazed orb. With the girl's cultivation base, it is another treasure that was refined by her to be her destiny, which can't be completely concealed. From this, it can be seen that this snare drum is not only a treasure of immortal soldiers, but also among the immortal soldiers, are destined to be superior. Every year on New Year's Eve in the Sui Shou Palace, there is the old custom of burning lamps and candles, and drumming to expel the ghosts of the epidemic. It is Wu Yu who is responsible for these 2 things. When Wu Yu was at the Crane Inn, he used the pseudonym New Year's Window. It was because when she was young, once she kept up with her father. Wu Shuangjiang likes to read miscellaneous books, and especially likes to read the notes of literati who have anecdotes. Wuyu once heard his father say a sentence in a book. The people in the window write decals on the window paper, and the appearance of the window is very good. It may have been seen in a book or it may have been sent out of feelings, who knows? Wuyu said, "Looking back, I will ask my father?" Yu Yen shook his head quickly. "Wuyu, restraint, be restrained, don't hinder us from being trained on the palace lord's side. Over the past 300 years, there have been 10 people in the Qingming world with minimal changes, almost all of them old people. Bai Yujing occupied the top 3 seats without any disagreement. The chief master teaches Ko's name, the second master teaches Yudo, and the third master teaches Lu Qin. Fourth, it is the old man, the head of Huayang Palace in Lung Mountain, Gaogu with the road name Jiue. Fifth, Xiandu Guan Sun Huaizhong. Sixth, Yashan Lin Jiangxian is the only pure martial artist on the list. The next few were all old faces with names and names. The others are like Sui Chu Gong Wu Shuangjiang, the female ancestor of the 2 Jingshan mountains, and the Taoist song, Overlooking, because they have been in retreat for too long and have been commented, and they have all withdrawn from the list of the 10 people in the world. As for our continent, the years of retreat have been longer, and the crown of the prostitute with the name Taiyin was almost completely forgotten by Qingming world. Regarding the past 10 people in the world, except for 4, the various rankings are still considered to be controversial among the spectators. Of course, these 4 are 3 Bai Yujing head teachers, plus a Xuanta master Sun Daochang. But this time, I don't know who made the list, the latest 10 people in the world. Full of mystery, even a kind of undercurrent. Murderous. The person at the top of the list is Bai Yujing, the second head teacher Yudo. Second, the 3 masters of Bai Yujing, the lord of Nanhua City Lu Shen. Third, the dojo is temporarily located in the Bixiao Cave Master among the bright moon and bright colors. Fourth, the ancestral home of Yongzhou, casual cultivator, refining master, female champion Wuzhou. Fifth, Qizhou Xuandu observes the lord, Sun Huaizhong. Sixth, Ruzhou Qijin dynasty Yashan Lin Jiangxian. The first person in martial arts in the world. Seventh, Su Gong Wu Shuangjiang. Eighth, Yuzhou Daifishan Huayang Palace, Gaogu. The world's first alchemy master. Ninth, Binzhou Qingshan dynasty Yashang Yaoqing. 10th, the 2 are tied together. The female crown of Xuandu Guandao Kongshan, Wang Sunday Runyue Peak is a pure martial artist, hard work. There are 10 alternates. But compared to the top 10, the spectators can't afford much interest. First of all, in this list of 10 people, there is no such thing as the leader of Bai Yujing. This is enough shocking news, and it is not an exaggeration to say that it is a bolt from the blue. Secondly, Wuzhou's re-emergence is equivalent to her 14 realms. She squeezed out Gaogu's position. It is not surprising, but why Gaogu did not follow closely? The 5th person has really become an iron law in the Qingming world? Or is it? Sun Guanzhu has actually also been among the 14th realms? Xian Du Guan is a line of sword immortals in Dao sect, but Sun Huaizhong is that, the 14th realm of pure sword repair? In addition to Dao Chang's son, there is now one more senior sister and grandson in Xuanduguan, but who has no idea about the grievances between Xuanduguan and Bai Yujing? Is it possible? Xie Chuanqiao just returned the book to Wu Yu, who shook his head and said, "You keep it." Zhang Yuanbo remembered something, squeezed his chin and said in doubt, "Ms. Gue temporarily regretted that she didn't come to the Qingming world with us. Did she notice something wrong here?" Yu Hao thought of the graceful and graceful Mrs. Gue and his wife's auntie, but with a completely different charm, the man couldn't help but laughed. As a result, he immediately suffered an elbow from Xie Chuanqiao, making the man sweat on the forehead. Xie Chuanqiao sighed for no reason. "I still can't believe that young man can become a hermit and can also engrave on the head of the city." The clear eyes of the young man with the sword back then are really impressive. The former sword-backed youth, and later the last hermit, became the patron of the inn. I visited the upside-down mountain twice and stayed at the Crane Inn at the end of the alley. Zhang Yuanbo smiled and nodded and glanced at Wu Yu. "I think Dong Huafu it's good to watch." Wu Yu just pretended not to hear the implication. Back in the days when Upside Down Mountain returned to Qingming, Dong Huafu and Yan Zhuo followed Cheng Quan to the Sui Chu Palace, and they browsed the Sui Chu Palace together. During the period they encountered the girl film with the horns and lights. They were successful in cultivation and they looked at their young age and talked to them in a weird manner. It's a pity that I ran into Patriarch. Wu Yu really couldn't scold that Dong Haitan. The most afraid of a quarrel is that you don't understand what the other person is talking about. Fortunately, neither side did it, but had an appointment. She thinks that the 2 foreigners are not high in realm, and they are also guests of Sui Qigong, so she has no common knowledge with them. But so far Wu Yu still doesn't know that it was the arrangement made by Dong Huafu to help Qin Pingyan, and it has nothing to do with Dong Huafu. On Shilong Rock, Wu Shuangjiang came here in person. Wu Shuangjiang chatted with the young-looking Nalan Xiaowei about spiritual practice, and in the end only Qingquan was left, walking with the palace lord along the river. As the 16 leaders of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the old Yuan Ing Qingquan carried a sword box wrapped in cotton cloth, and contained a natal lamp for Nalan to burn the reeds. Qingquan joined the Zushiteng mountain and water genealogy of Sui Qigong, but he didn't give it to him and he never received an official Taoism. This means that Lao Jianxiu is not yet a Taoist official. The dragon stone at the feet of both parties should have migrated with the water and would not take root somewhere for long. However, Wu Shuangjiang personally imposed several restrictions and was forcibly detained here. In fact, apart from the value of the Shilong stone itself, Wu Shuangjiang's move is very uneconomical. It is a loss-making business. If it is left in other sects and Taoist temples, a circular river channel may be dug and a Shilong stone that drifts with the flow. It is a long-standing benefit that can continue to add water transportation. It's just that Sui Qigong has a profound background, and Wu Shuangjiang's violent act of heaven and earth is too much, not bad. In history there are 4 Shilong stones. One was completely shattered in the battle between water and fire, one was later refined by an ancient immortal, and the other was once seen by Mrs. Tan Tan and Lu Shui Keng. For the forbidden boulder in the sea. Finally, it is the dojo of Sui Qigong. Rumors are only rumors. The Taoist couple of the former palace lord Wu Shuangjiang, she had mediocre cultivating skills and liked to collect rare treasures in the world. Wu Shuangjiang took her to travel around the world, and all her favorite things would be brought back to Sui Qigong by Wu Shuangjiang. After learning about the series of deeds, Qingquan asked tentatively, "Palace Master Wu, are there any landscape paintings? Can I watch one or two?" Wu Shuangjiang stopped, and in the river outside Xialongxi water mist rose up, the river water was like a mirror, and in that picture of water patterns, I saw a mad female cultivator who laughed wildly and raised one. She patted her head with a rotten arm that fell like ashes. Lost and mad, threatened to kill the young hidden official as if it were an extra battle, but she actually asked the young hidden official to be the culprit and defeat Tueshen. Then there was a golden thunder and lightning, beating the body of the fairyland female cultivator into powder. Because the picture scroll was pinched to the end, Qingquan looked at a loss. This is what happened. As for the great demon of the fairyland, Qingquan certainly recognized the other party. The female monk's name was Fanlu, and he was once the lord of a sect in the wild world. It seems that she can only rely on a life-saving lamp to break a part of her soul, and then go to borrow the corpse to restore the soul, but this is the most inferior corpse. After all, the monster monk is far more than the human trainer. Pay attention to the real body. Many magic techniques and the fundamentals of great avenues are all related to the true body and soul. Therefore, the number of demon cultivators fell far more than the human cultivators. What's more, even if you can start all over again, it is no longer difficult to follow the old path of previous life practice. Since you can't familiarize yourself with the old path, how can you practice smoothly in the future? Therefore, for any sect in the barren world, every time the Zushiteng enshrines a lamp of renewal, it is almost a business that is doomed to lose money. Even if it was the sect master, even if he could rely on the life renewal lamp, the following would often be a change of dynasty without any suspense. Although Qingquan couldn't figure out the joints, he didn't delay Lao Jiangxia's smile. Being beheaded at Tuoyue Mountain is like being hacked to death by a Taoist official in by Yujing, when a Confucian monk was beaten to death by an outsider in the Middle-earth Confucian temple. Have a good time. Our hidden officer indeed is always Liangxiang Ziyu. Wu Shuangjiang smiled and said, "It is true that Fanlu is upright and upright, fighting with the young hermit, she won't die so badly. It's just that the battle of Tuoyue Mountain is too treacherous, just like the disciple of Tuoyue Mountain's ancestor. The culprit teamed up with Qin Pinggan and eliminated their cultivators of the 5 realms of the wilderness who had stayed in Tuoyue Mountain as a guest." Qingquan said in shock, "This dial? Not just the old witch Fanlu?" Wu Shuangjiang nodded and said, "More." Old Jinxiu laughed loudly, "It's worth noting that I quarreled with Master Hermit and didn't fight back." Wu Shuangjiang laughed off. Old Jinxiu was full of emotion. "This hermit sir really never disappoints." Wu Shuangjiang suddenly smiled and asked, "Qingquan, who do you hate most in your life?" Qingquan was silent. "Of course I hate a lot, just say those monsters beasts, can you count them? But the person Qingquan hates most is actually himself. Hate the sparse swordsmanship in this life. I hate myself for being timid, even Dong Sanging and Chi Tingji dare to scold them. As for the old deaf children, they are not worthy of Qing Quan to waste their saliva, but such a number one sword repairer in this life, they dare not even say the word they like. Some things will not wait for others. Some people do not wait for others. Qing Quan looked sad. Wu Shuangjiang said, Sword Xiu Huiting of the Red Leaf Sword Sect, surely you remember? Qing Quan's eyes instantly sharpened. Qing Quan and his best friend Zhao Gufeng once had a private agreement that next time Hui Ting will appear at the Great Wall of Jianxi, if Hui Ting can no longer be sacked, both parties will be dumb in the future. It's a pity that Hui Ting had broken that fate flying sword Fat Powder on the battlefield 100 years ago. After falling, he recovered from his wounds in the sect and did not participate in the final battle. Wu Shuangjiang said, There is another picture scroll, let's see for yourself. It turned out to be to slay the Red Leaf Sword Sect's Yuaning Realm Sword Xiu Hui Ting. Qin Pingan let go of a monk from the Fairyland demon race. Of course, the latter's vitality was also severely injured after the Battle of Tuoyue Mountain. Hui Ting chose to trade life for a demon clan fairy who had never been to the Great Wall of Jianxi in exchange for a way out. On that battlefield, the sword light fell straight first, smashing the Hui Ting head down, and everything was two on the spot. Then an unparalleled sword light swept across and cut it off. Then use a suspended mind board to slowly refine the monk's soul with 5 thunders. The most terrifying thing is that in the bright thunderboard with endless rhyme, 2 golden texts that have been forcibly stripped out appeared, which are the real names of Hui Ting's monster race. A brutal killing that can make the backs of bystanders chill and creepy. The Great Wall of Sword Chi is full of wars, and there is a tragic picture on the battlefield with endless cruel methods. Just say me you Nailand Saihuan Chi show these sword repairs, in the eyes of the wild monsters, are they good things? And the reason why this picture scroll is so uncomfortable is because the person who shot it is Qin Pingan. But Qing Quan is definitely an exception. There will never be anything wrong. Wu Shuangjiang put away the secret method, and the scroll disappeared with the water. If life is impermanent, Ping Zong is uncertain. Wu Shuangjiang went to the crane tower. Lao Jianxiu thanked Palace Master Wu, and then walked alone by the river, with a relaxed expression and a free smile. It was an act done by the hidden officer. On the wall of the past years during the fighting side by side, he couldn't scold the young hermit. As soon as the old man turned around, it seemed that he had not had time to suppress his smile, and suddenly he was already crying. Accidentally. Inside the crane tower. Wu Shuangjiang gradually ascended to the top floor, the door opened by itself and he walked into a room. In the history of Qingming world, Sui Chu Gong had always been a barely second-rate sect until Wu Shuangjiang appeared, and he lifted Sui Chu Gong to the top sect in the world entirely by his own power. Except for Wu Shuangjiang's own high attainments in Taoism, it can be said that the bottleneck of each realm is as nothing, but what Wu Shuangjiang really makes the world's monks fear lies in his unique ability in preaching and teaching karma. Therefore Wu Shuangjiang is notorious for saying nothing in the palace. Inside the house, in addition to Bai Luo who is the watchman, there is also a Taoist and literary official, Gao Ping. In addition there are still 3 people. One was just looking at a Taoist official who was about the same age as Gao Ping. His face in his weak crown was extremely heroic. He was named Huan Jing and his Taoist name was Wu Hao. There was also an old man with the nickname Big Talking Talent in private, and his pseudonym was Chang Yu. He didn't flinch when he saw the Swaisher Palace Master who had crossed the threshold. The last one is a ghost with insufficiency. His surname is Yang, but he has long since left the sect and family. He has been in retreat in Sui Chu Gong for many years. This is the first time he has left the dojo. Wu Shuangjiang was the first to sit cross-legged and smiled and said, "You are welcome. Outside the crane tower, the clouds and water are long, and we are in the same sorrow with you. In the crane tower there are heroes of soldiers who can sit together. Some people seem to exist only in books. Then some people seem to have come out of the book. And this book is called Wu Temple. How in the world Tonggi's Hao Zhenyalu. The vision of heaven and earth that the mountains and rivers and gods admired the incense together gradually disappeared. Among them, 1 scented water incense and 1 scented mountain were from the old man of Shijianhu, who acted as the imitating by Yujing, and the pure Yang Taoist Lu Yan. Since I have made a decision on the merits that those senior brothers left you, I have to remind you. The holy master smiled and joked, the merits are dissipated. It is out of selfishness. There is no return. Don't take a fluke. Qin Pingan nodded. Aside from anything else, Qin Pingan sacrificed the Xiao Fingdu, that was not part of his life-flying sword. The most sage master didn't feel surprised, A young man who couldn't even smash Dao Xian with embroidered tigers, his brain was bright, not surprising. It's just that he didn't rush to make a move. The most sage master asked with a smile for no reason. A cultivator doesn't have a Dao name yet, isn't it? When Qin Pingan rarely smiles and is embarrassed, he can't be on the side of the most holy master and say that he is very good at naming him because there are too many candidates for the road number, but he doesn't know how to choose, right? The holy master asked again, I will go to the Qingming world in the future. Do you think about your pseudonym? Qin Pingan was stunned, shook his head. I haven't thought about it yet. There are a lot of pseudonyms such as Xuanhuan from Luzhou and Beiju, Chao Mo from Tonggishao, and Do Yi from wuxialover. As for Qingming Tianxia, there is it. But the most sacred master smiled and said, It's good to know it by yourself, don't need to tell me so as not to reveal the secret. Then the most sacred master stretched out his hand and twisted the flying sword with 2 fingers. There was no need for Qing Tong to open the restraint of the town demon building. He just threw the flying sword lightly outside the town demon building and turned it into a slender strip. Lu Ying went away thousands of miles in an instant, disappearing in the night. Suddenly, as countless stars are gradually falling into the wilderness of the world, the lights are brilliant on the earth, they light up one by one and gradually become dense as if there are those tens of trillions shining and shining, uncountable. In the ruined city in the wilderness, if the fluorescent light is dotted, it is trance like a lone traveler with a light, and there are people who seem to be partners and carry double lights. All are the dead and no burial place, can only wander in the lonely soul field ghosts. There are densely lit places, the broken mountains and rivers of Tonggishao, no one collects the waste accounts, and the remnants of the broken flags are returned to the horses. The ruins of large and small battlefields in the continuous dilapidated city are complex. The queen still has no time to do the water and land puja, the dead soul that cannot be memorialized, but the Yin spirits gather and the obsession is deep. After death, they still hope to protect the heroic spirits of the mountains and rivers. The widows are immersed into rivers, although the fire is slightly capable of burning wild. The lights are dazzling everywhere like pedestrians on the road, and they have to go their separate ways. In the many government offices and private academies, it seems that there is a sound of books, such as reading lights at night, and there are faintly lighted like people crossing the river or rushing in the wind. Or he hesitated and looked back, there is the city and countryside with few lights, if the lights are shining in the cold window, and the lights meet on the road, stopping like an old man. There are places where Taiping Mountain, Fuzhong, Yezigang and other sects were destroyed. It seems that there are lights as if monks are rising from the wind, bringing bursts of fluorescent light in the dark night, and there are lights in all parts of the continent. High like a couple life and death they are reluctant to part and there are those high and low gaps. It is almost the adults holding the hands of their children, as if the parents are bowing their heads to comfort the children, not afraid, parents are by their side. The holy master turned his head and looked at the Qingshan guest beside him. The young man who had been looking into the distance silently before, when he saw the last scene, his eyes were hazy with tears, his lips trembled and his face was wrinkled vigorously. The most sage master waited quietly for the young people around him, picking up his emotions bit by bit. The young man turned his head, took a few deep breaths, then turned his head back and silently thanked the most holy master. The old man turned to his side and bowed his hands in return. Look at the time, the new year is coming soon. So when Qin Pingan straightened up and got up, he realized that he was no longer in the demon tower of Tonggishao town, but to return to the top of Dayuesui mountain. It is rumored that in ancient times, there was a solar term courtyard in Suishan, in which there was a drum for spring festival. Ringing this drum is to say goodbye to the old and welcome the new in the world, and to celebrate the spring of the world. But for some reason, no one has beaten a drum to welcome the spring festival in Suishan for too many years. Qin Pingan, who was on the high platform of the Solar Terms Academy, stared at the giant primrose drum in a daze and took a deep breath. Qin Pingan began to beat the drums. Sound the primal drum and the world welcomes the spring. Sword of Coming Chapter 957. Spring is the first year of the year. There is the beginning of all things, the meaning of all rebirth. It is not only the beginning of the 4 o'clock, but also the first of a year old. When Qin Pingan returned to the demon tower of Tonggishao town from the solar term courtyard on the top of Mount Sui, the most sage master and the Taoist pure yang were no longer visible. Only Xiao Mo, who was left with a yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo sticks, was standing in the corridor on the top floor with Qing Tong in a green robe. Qin Pingan put that night tur back on his back, ready to go home. This time he went out for a long trip, from leaving Shindu Mountain with Xiaoma, entering the town demon building, and stepping into Zhou Zi secretly instructed, Qing Tong personally. There are 12 phantom worlds laid out, and dozens of landscape temples in that dream. In the Fen Shrine within the territory of Mingliang country, you meet Lu Qin again, and then join together to board the Huangliang Pai Lu Mountain. Compared with all my previous travels, the time lapsed according to the real scale actually took a short time, but if you count the landscape journey in the 12 pictures, plus the mental journey, it can be said to be like a world away. Qing Tong saw the young hidden official who was in the dust and he stopped talking. Of course, he wanted to participate in the next festival on Shindu Mountain, but he couldn't tell for a while. In fact, Qing Tong had already made up his mind and had to hug him. Xian Dushan's thigh, Qin Pingan must not be allowed to run like this tonight. For a scholar who can ring the spring festival drum for the saint after a lapse of thousands of years, in Qing Tong's view, it is not so important whether he is a close disciple in the same line of Wensheng. Qing Tong even guessed that as long as Qin Pingan himself is willing to work hard in this direction, he will be the deputy head of the Confucian temple in the future, even if he is already in his pocket. Qin Pingan looked at Qing Tong, who wanted to speak but stopped talking several times, and asked with a smile, "Senior Qing Tong, do you have something to say?" Qing Tong smiled awkwardly and gave up a bit. The other party no longer calls his name directly, and he is not even a young fellow. Obviously, I was going to cross the river to demolish the bridge, and to draw a clear line between myself and the town demon building. It's a long journey with Qin Pingan. He has been with this young hermit who once mistakenly thought he was Jing Juzhong of Baidi City for a long time. Qing Tong feels that he has some insightful skills. Smell the strings to know the elegance. Xiao Mo couldn't stand Qing Tong's chirps and delayed his son's journey and said straightforwardly, "My son, Qing Tong, wants to participate in Shindu Mountain's next sect celebration." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Small things, trivial things, just attending the ceremony. Young fellow Taoist, don't think too much. I just don't think Xian Dushan did not send out invitations. Yuli is not in harmony, and I am worried that I will be slow to treat fellow Taoists." Qing Tong quickly coughed and signaled Xiao Mo to say everything. "Don't be so muddled. This trip to the mountains and rivers, there is no credit and hard work. You Shindu Mountain, how should you give a chief as a dang? Besides, a great cultivator in the ascended realm, not to mention the host of half of Tongyi's Hao, actually needs to ask others to serve as a sect, guess Qing, and it is a big joke to spread out." Xiao Mo said, "Qing Tong still wants to serve as the honorable guest of Qingping Sword Sect or as a guest of honor, so I just chatted and wanted me to help with a few words. I said that this might involve adding a seat to the next ancestor. I'm just a memorial service for the chair of the chair. Of course, if it doesn't count, the son has to decide whether it will succeed or not. What's more, it's not easy for us to say anything about it." Qin Pingan suddenly thought for a moment, nodded and said, "Qing Tong, you are willing to condescend to take the initiative to attend the ceremony, and then be a named honorary guest. Of course, Shindu Mountain will be splendid because of this, which is really a good thing. But Xiaoma, I really didn't deliberately lie to you. When I came to the next business, I had an agreement with student Chui Dongshan, almost never intervening, and handed it over to Chui Dongshan. On the side of Shangzong's Luapa Mountain, I held discussions at the Patriarch's Hall. I blamed myself for being unreliable. I was a mountain lord for so many years. Because I was used to being a shopkeeper who couldn't see people, I was not on the mountain all the year round. Well, for many things they deliberately stunned me and sang the opposite." Xiao Mo immediately followed his words, "So I didn't seem to believe it when I saw Qing Tong before, so I gave a ready-made example. The proud student of the Son of the Year and now the First Lord of Shindu Mountain, Chui Xianxia, pledged to recommend the old Lord Jiang. Serving as the chief worshipper of Luapa Mountain is not a small objection. The process is quite tortuous. I heard from Zhou Hufa. At that time, there were quarrels in the Patriarch Hall of the Jisa Peak. Chief Mountain." Qing Tong said sternly, "If it's really embarrassing, just pretend that I didn't mention it. Love it, I really don't serve it anymore." Qin Pingan smiled, and he was with me. He really wasn't used to you. Xiao Mo reminded him in his heart. Before the sun was traveling far away, Qing Tong emptied several houses for many years, and depending on the posture, he was going to use it as a celebration gift. Qin Pingan glared at Xiao Mo. "You can't tell me about this kind of thing right away?" Master Yingguan immediately raised the ending and prolonged a sigh. "The fellow Taoist is still talking angry. Don't be like that. Based on the friendship between me and fellow Taoist, the word friends of Taoist is simply a measure for the three of us. The statement made by the body is public for private, and sentimental for reason. Xiao and I should strongly recommend one or two for you to get a chair in the Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. Qing Tong nodded. Seems to be still in anger. Before leaving the Jinyao Tower, Qin Pingan suddenly smiled and said, Qing Tong, don't talk about anything else, just talk about friends of the Taoist. My fellow friends, am very sincere and sincere. Qing Tong nodded and said, I only believe this sentence. Xiao glanced at his son. Qin Pingan nodded quietly, understanding. This young fellow Taoist is different now, and he is not a good deceiver. After Qin Pingan took the lead in twisting out the 3-mountain talisman, Qing Tong was quite surprised, but remained calm. Was it anxious to return to Shindu Mountain, or did it mean that Qin Pingan no longer needs to consume merits when he cast this great talisman? Relying on the Shudi mountains and rivers of the Sanshan talisman, in a few blinks of an eye, he came to a mountain. Already in the boundary of Qingping Sword Sect, Shindu, Yunzong, Preservation, the 3 mountains stand side by side. It is a pattern of 1 main and 2 auxiliary. This place is the place where Chao Sunny retreats. Including Yunjing Mountain, the 2 mountains are still hidden by the formation. The 3 mountains were once the old mountain relics of Tonggishao. The main peaks of the 2 mountains are respectively erected on the top of the mountain with a stele, which is carved by Cui Dongshan, I can't leave the Chao, and Heaven and Earth Purple Qi. Qin Pingan with a green shirt and a sword, Xiaoma with a yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo sticks, a green robe and a handsome youth. There are green bamboo forests in the mountains, the wind shakes the bamboo forests and the mountains are full of rime. The 3 of them walked along the water. The stream among the bamboo forests was gurgling, and there were stones above the water, and the clusters of prosperous pods were verdant and lovely. In the water there are many small ponds formed by the accumulation of gravel, and the water in Shihong is especially clear, deep and full of fish, suddenly up and down. There are many bamboo clumps on both sides of the stream, and the chaotic rocks under the bamboo clumps are like teeth, reflecting the water like cows and horses drinking in the stream. Qin Pingan smiled and introduced, the main peak of Yunzing Mountain elsewhere, Wuxiaofeng, will be the dojo of Cui Dongshan, the next sect master. He also serves as the first mountain lord of Yunzingshan. Next, except for the abbot. In a specific matter, there will be a wide range of disciples, Taoju, swordsmanship, boxing, talisman, alchemy, formations, economics, etc., will be divided into categories, and each disciple will be collected. When Ping Feng discusses matters, Cui Dongshan will also propose that among the young genealogical monks who will become Qingping Sword Sect in the future, the first sword repairman who has reached the Jade Pure Realm can take over my Chaofeng as the second mountain lord. And the Jingxing Peak under our feet, not the entire Premio Mountain, will be temporarily handed over to Chao Qingqing, who is here to retreat in Jedan, because Chao Qingqing is the first monk of Jing Xingfeng. It is the next suzerain who has no suspense. This matter, the upper and lower cases, has long been known. Then Qingping Jianzong has an additional tradition, which is an unwritten rule, since the second suzerain Chao Qingqi, the third and all next suzerains will be Jing Xingfeng's peak master origin. For this, we obviously borrowed from Yuguizong's Jiuifeng. Since the sect's name is Qingping Jianzong, then of course it is based on Kendo. The Shindu Mountain, which is the ancestral mountain, is the home of future swordsmanship. Yunjing Mountain may be responsible for accepting pure martial arts, except for Cui Dongshan. Xiaozong also have a kind of master as well as the right side of Sui Xianfeng, plus we have a very good relationship with Pushan, teaching boxing. The problem is not big. On the side of Shimiashan, all scholars are practicing Qi, maybe there will be some. In fact, Qing Tong was not very interested in these sect affairs. Hearing Qin Ping's talk around him, it fell in his ears, that is, the stream flowed slowly and he didn't care about it. However, it is not a trivial matter when it comes to the inheritance of a sect in the hereditary secret method. It is not a trivial matter to put it in any hilltop fairy house. It is just that Qin Pinganyan is light and light at the moment. In fact, it is a genealogy of the future Qingping Sword Sect. For the monk, it may be countless love, hatred, and ups and downs of people's hearts. So Qin Pingan did not regard him as an outsider. Xiao Mo smiled and said, My fellow Taoist fellow, I have heard many things for the first time, so don't be so absent-minded. Qing Tong looked helpless, but Mianli hid the needle. I can't take out this booklet and write down these words one by one. Xiao Mo smiled and said, I built a dojo at the foot of Shindu Mountain, a place just named Luobaetan. I believe that I will inevitably worship Qing Tong or Qing Tong Kiching in the future, and I often greet the past. Qing Tong's face was stiff. Qin Pingan asked coldly, For so many years have you not recruited a few disciples who taught Taoism or martial arts? After all, Qingtong is equal to half the Ascended Realm monk who is equal to half a boundless warrior. Moreover, Qingtong's temperament that he often visits the lotus roots and blessed land does not seem like a person who likes to have a deserted life. Qingtong shook his head and said with a face, I never did. The main reason is that he is responsible for sitting in the demon tower and his responsibilities are too special. Qingtong dares to accept disciples casually, worrying that he will be embarrassed, and the old master of the East China Sea, the master of Bixiadong, has also been rudely. I have beaten Qingtong, saying that Qingtong is not the piece of material that can establish sects on his own. Facts have proved that Qingtong has been cautiously sailing the ship for 10,000 years. Only the disaster in the Taiping Mountain is the best lesson for us. The Jianghu Tower is very likely to be reduced to a similar situation. Moreover, Qingtong feels that once he has a disciple, he will definitely be unable to stop accepting disciples. It is similar to the collection of houses in the town demon building. Qingtong never looks at the appearance or the degree of rarity. Just look at the fate, then the arrival of the closed disciple will definitely be indefinitely. Chen Pingan said with emotion, the young fellow Taoists are really seeking the truth with all their heart, making others feel ashamed. Qingtong hesitated again and stopped. Because the reason why he would brazenly climb the relationship with Shindu Mountain is because the situation has changed today, and Qingtong's mind has changed accordingly, and he really wants to find a first-generation ancestor of the XX sect. Chen Pingan seemed to see through Qingtong's thoughts and said, I will return to my life after I retreat. I will travel to Hauran with my friends during the retreat. Then, see if you can be allowed to start a sect in a place in the middle of Tonggishao, near the demon building of the town, and strive to allow the local monster monks on the side of Tonggishao to join your sect, and save them from rumbling all year round. Dao heart is lost and there is no intention to practice. Over time, this group of monster monks who have been resentful will have some hidden dangers in Tonggishao. Qingtong, you took the initiative to follow us to Qingping Sword sect. You have selfishness. I brought you to this Jingxing peak. Actually, you also have selfishness. Qingtong wondered, what do you mean? Chen Pingan walked along the bamboo path with his arms folded. Those who are far-sighted and cautious can do great things. People who are loyal and honest can count on great things. In my opinion, the existence of fellow Taoists can be completely aside from the Jianghu Tower. It is the fourth mountain besides Qingping Sword sect immortal capital, Yunjing, and preservation. The young fellow Taoist may not be an outstanding ancestor of the sect, but he will definitely be an extremely responsible and dedicated guardian. Xiaomo was surprised. Saying 3 extreme characters in one breath, is Qingtong really worthy of this evaluation? The words of my son didn't have any meaning, so he put all the meanings on the table directly, hoping that Qingtong could become the guardian behind the Qingping Sword sect, at least one of them. Qingtong was even more surprised, smiling bitterly and laughed at himself. Even if you say it honestly, I don't believe it myself. Chen Pingan smiled and said, you can believe in this matter because I have come here step by step. You can rest assured that fellow Taoists don't worry about falling into a nest of right and wrong. I will talk to Cui Dongshan in advance and promise that you will not be involved in any sect affairs because of your realm and identity. So you only need to, as a half-a foreigner, pay more attention to the development trend of Qingping Jinzong year after year. As long as there is something wrong, even if you can't tell what is wrong, you can talk to Cui Dongshan or the second suzerain in the future. Chao Yingqing took the initiative to put it forward, without worrying about whether his views are right or wrong. Qingtong nodded, I only promise to do my best. I will not make any other promises. Chen Pingan smiled and said, then it's a deal. The group walked to the top of Jingxing Peak. The sky was clear and the sky was clear, the mountains were blue and the moon was white. They looked around relaxed and happy. Because of Lu Chen's evaluation, he described the inscription as some kind of immortal slough. So Chen Pingan took another look at the stone tablet this time. A young man in Confucian shirt walked out of the stone room quickly and said, Sir, a stranger. Sure enough, as Lu Chen had expected, Chao Qingqing's Jin Dan had a rank between the first and second ranks. The first grade of Danqing is a soaring aptitude such as Wei Shi from Ai Zhou in his early years, and Yao Qing from Qingming World. But in fact, many of the great monks standing on the top of the world are mostly the second grade of Danqing. Chen Pingan smiled comfortedly, it's above the second grade of Danqing, it's great. It's much stronger than that of Mr. Pill that year. Then Chen Pingan began to introduce the Qingtong around him. This fellow Taoist, the Taoist named Qingtong, is a native monk from Tonggishao who has ascended to the realm. Because of the Taoist name, it is in the name of our Qingping Sword sect. The word green, fellow Taoists of Qing thinks it is a rare fate, and I have been invited several times so they will serve as the name worship of Qingping sword sect. Chao Qingqing saluted again. Junior Chao Sunny, I have met Senior Qing Tong. Qing Tong nodded in greeting, smiled and slandered in his heart. The hidden officer really came here with his mouth open. Qin Pingan said, the realm and qualifications of the fellow Taoists are clearly laid out over there. Just because Miyu is the predecessor of the predecessor, the fellow Taoists can only be second. Qing Tong was speechless. Is this the second consecration? Isn't this all very convincing? Chao Qingqing smiled kindly and said, after all, we Qingping sword sect is still a kendo sect, so we can only wrong the seniors of Qingping. Qing Tong smiled and said, it's not about grievances, it's an honor to be associated with Qingping Jianzong. I dare not feel aggrieved at all. What's more, Xiaomo next to him, an ascended realm perfect sword repairer, is now not only a named worship of the fallen mountain, he is not as good as himself, so far he has not had a second place. A young man dressed in white with a mole on his eyebrows rushed to the wind. When his figure was swaying and falling, his two snow-white sleeves were hunting and screaming, and he said, see you, mister. As soon as Cui Dongshan got up, there was a young woman with a ball in a bun, and a girl in black came to Jing Xingfeng. It turned out that after Cui Dongshan noticed the trail of the husband and his party, he knocked on the door and asked the master sister Pei Qian to call on the millet who had stayed up all night in the house to watch for the years. Millet was very excited and reported the good news. Good man Mountain Lord, Yumi has broken the border, is the well-deserved, well-known, genuine Midajian fairy. Chen Pingan deliberately showed an unexpected look on his face and exclaimed, awesome. Qing Tong's heart moved slightly. The meter of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the first chief worshipper of Shindu Mountain, turned out to be a fairyland sword repairer. Chen Pingan bent over and rubbed the head of the millet grains. Do you often guard the gate for me, Jiangxian? Xiaomi Li grinned and said, what the hell, occasionally. Millet Grains stretched out his hand to block his mouth and whispered to the good man mountain owner. Yumi said, the process of retreat can be dangerous or dangerous, that is, whenever the Taoist heart is unstable, I often think of the imminent danger of the hermit on the battlefield. The chaos, the heart is settled, and this is the chance to break through, so Yumi told me repeatedly that this time I can break the bottleneck and live out of the customs. In addition to sincere thanks to Sect Master Lu of the Taihui Sword Sect, most of the credit is left. All it has nothing to do with his own cultivation base, jianxin, or a coin. Qin Pingan laughed angrily, blurted out and said, fuck his mother's ass. Millet scratched his face. Qin Pingan immediately became happy with Yenyu. Leave him alone, let's go back to Mi Xiefeng. Qing Tong was silent. As for the atmosphere of Luapa Mountain, because Qin Pingan chose to go through the house instead of entering in his dream, Qing Tong has never been able to personally experience one or two. However, Xiao Mo's words and deeds have made Qing Tong mentally prepared, but from the current situation, it seems that it is still not enough. Qin Pingan helped introduce Qing Tong again. After that, there were two more figures. They came from the ghost city in the Great Yuan dynasty. They were Zhong Kuei and the ghost fairy Yujin who called himself Gusu. Qin Pingan had to introduce the identity of Qing Tong again, but ignoring the realm of Jinyao Tower and Qing Tong, I didn't believe in Zhong Kuei, but in the fat man who looked greasy, an emperor who almost completed the feat of one continent and one country earlier than the Dalisong family, Shu the so-called husband with a blade, cut down 1,000,000 heads, is not an exaggeration. Zhong Kuei glanced at Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan nodded. Zhong Kuei secretly gave a thumbs up. Qin Pingan also gave Zhong Kuei a thumbs up. Meeting is not against the heart, only without saying. Not bad. Because two friends are like one who is responsible for opening the road, and the other is responsible for helping protect the road. Qin Pingan also witnessed some kind of invincible posture of Zhong Kuei on the way to the ghost road. It is not easy to open a road, but it is even more difficult to protect the road. In the entire northwest boundary of Tonggishao, Zhong Kuei was almost entirely on his own, using a magnificent method similar to that of Bai Yes sword-making thousands in Fuyaozhou. His body transformed into countless roads, helping countless ghosts. Yinling guides the way forward, while resisting the wind between the heavens and the earth, forcibly suppressing the immortal mansion practitioners and various landscape gods along the way, and the innate suppression of the lonely souls and wild ghosts, and escorting them into the fans leading to the underworld. Inside the gate, that was definitely a feat that no ascended realm cultivator could accomplish. At the same time, Zhong Kuei also took a trip to Xuanhuan Road in person. He directly issued a series of decrees without seeing the Honorable Fujian of Fengdu, strictly ordering the underlings, ghosts and numerous tatau horse faces on the road. It's not allowed to flog any of the inbound ghosts without authorization. The key is that the entire position is transcendent, and it can even ignore the Confucian temple by Yujing's etiquette and rules and the Taoist decree. It seems that there is no objection to this, which is equivalent to tacitly acquiescing to Zhong Kuei's overstepping. Therefore, in the middle of the night when the old and the new alternate, it may be destined to be a sleepless night for all the cultivators of Tonghishao, the 3 Confucian academies, the emperors and generals of various countries, and the gods of mountains and rivers. In fact, when Zhong Kuei left, he even took the fat man Eugene, followed by a trip to the far gate so that Eugene's aura of heaven and earth was exhausted. For Gixian Eugene, it is a special kind of protection. When he returned to the ruined ghost town where there was no lonely ghost, the fat man collapsed on the ground with exhaustion. An exhausted fat man lying on the ground only said something from the bottom of his heart, and slightly mocked himself, "I never thought that in my life besides killing, I would do this kind of thing." The fat man who was brought to Shindu Mountain by Zhong Kuei was still chattering on the road when he came here, complaining that Zhong Kuei didn't know that he was distressed, but the donkey who had his head scratched, he was exhausted to death. Only when Eugene came to Jing Xingfeng, he felt that the trip was worthwhile, and his eyes lit up because he saw the beautiful woman in a green robe. The fat man admired Qin Pingan from the bottom of his heart, Huang Ting Yi Yunyun, plus the unclear relationship between Her Majesty De Quan, all of them were great beauties. It's too shameful to be drunk with flowers and grass. While Qin Pingan was chatting with Zhong Kuei there, Fatty Pidian moved towards the fairy sister. Xiaxing's surname is Yu and his name is Gusu, and he is a close friend of Qin Shanju. I don't know the girl except for the name of Qing Tong. The surname is very famous. Where is your ancestral home where you live now? But there is a teacher's hilltop. The niche likes to travel in the mountains and water, and is willing to go down the mountain with Qing Tong's sister after the ceremony, and meet the elders by the way. Qing Tong is actually reluctant to talk to this ghost. Because Eugene was wandering around Tonghishao with Zhong Kuei before, Qing Tong glanced at the master and servant, and knew Eugene very well. As for being mistaken for a female nun by the fat man, Qing Tong didn't have any complaints. Eugene smiled and said, "You are not talented, but I just happen to have a poem and I have a bit of experience. For example, I saw a girl beautiful as a scroll, just like a Tongyin lady, Xiaoli, in the moon. There will be wind over Wu Yelishengeliang's words are sent out with feeling. I'm afraid of scaring the girl when I say it, I don't know it. Xiaoxing is actually a ghost, but the girl should not be sad about it. When Xiaoxing was alive, he once wrote tens of thousands of poems, but now he has changed his course. I turned to the poem, and when I saw the girl's elegance, he was a person in the woods who were good at this. For example, Xiaoxing wrote a lyrics recently, there is the melting moon, the light breeze, and the catkins are next to the pear flowers. It's just that I always feel that this is the place in this sentence. The words are still unfinished and it seems difficult to call them the best. The girl agrees? Wouldn't it be better if it was replaced with a brush and the breeze was blowing in the face? Would it be better if it was replaced with a supportive support? Would it have the longest aftertaste? The young fellow was so annoyed that he could only sneer in his heart. Eugene, I have read some of your unsightly cheating poems. If you want to say that you are planning to usurp the throne and lead soldiers to fight, you are the best in the world, but when it comes to this kind of poetry and lyrics, you don't seem to be even stubborn. With a sad expression in Eugene's eyes, he glanced at Qin Pingan slantingly and said grimly, someone really has a lot of friendship with the young girl, so I can talk about everything. Cui Dongshan asked, Sir, why don't you go to Mishue Peak to rest first, and half an hour before the celebration, I will let the millet grains notify Mr.? Millet took a deep breath, nodded vigorously and clenched the hiking stick and golden shoulder in his hands. Qin Pingan smiled and said, just take a nap and squint for a while. Cui Dongshan said, then I will go down the mountain with my husband and talk about something? After that, Chao Qingqing and the others returned to their homes at Mishue Peak in Shindu Mountain. Xiao Mo returned to Luobao Beach at the foot of the mountain alone, and Pei Qian would arrange Qing Tong's residence. However, Qin Pingan left millet grains and accompanied Cui Dongshan on a walk down the mountain Xingfeng. Cui Dongshan does have a few things to discuss with her husband. The first thing is whether to excavate a brand new blasphemy in the middle of Tonghishao. Previously, it was on the side of the old General Yao Jin's house and on the side of Pushen Yunkatang. Different from Aquarius, Tonghishao has an old history, but time has passed. It has been cut to pieces by the dynasties, various small country cities, and immortal mansions along the middle of the continent, and it is of little significance. The old is not as good as the new. Fortunately, there is a ready-made success rule that can be copied and applied, that is, Chidu of Aquarius, and this dadu was much more difficult to excavate in the past, and it is far greater than the old one of Tonggishao. Otherwise, even if Qin Pingan and Qingping Jianzong of Shindu Mountain are one of the initiators and the real leader, they will inevitably have a few big quarrels, and there will inevitably be many fundamental differences. In addition, how many grains of rain money it will cost to build a dadu depends on how big the stall will be in the new dadu that has not been named yet. On the Daquan dynasty, it's obviously been planned for a long time, and now there is a rough prototype of dadu riverbed, but in the eyes of Cui Dongshan, there are too many places that need to be corrected, and they are not trivial things that only need outsiders to check and fill in the vacancies. Qin Pingan heard the general situation and asked, "You talked about this with the old generals earlier, did you talk about a candidate who blasphemed against several high-level water gods?" Because according to the rules of the Confucian Temple, dadu together means that Tongye Zong can create 3 more high-ranking water gods out of thin air. Only Gongho is at least 3 high-ranking water gods. If you say that in addition to the lead Shindu Mountain and Qingping Jianzong, plus the Yao family of the Daquan dynasty Pushun or the Taiping Mountain which is more than Huangting, all belong to the initiator. Then it was their forces who sat down, closed the door, and divided up the 3 precious places early. Or open the door, attract as many countries and fairy sects as possible, and then list the most suitable water candidates, and take the initiative to give up 1 or even 2 of them. In fact, it is not a small problem. Some literati were accustomed to doing nothing but bad things. And it's not that you can get things done blindly and selflessly. Cui Dongshan blinked and said with a smile, "The students were in the old general's house before and everyone was talking about the matter. It's just because they were one by one at the time, and what they saw before them were all urgent, and I was more worried about whether this matter was feasible. After all, whether we can make a good start, we still have to say Mr. is not present, we didn't have and we didn't dare to talk so far." Qin Pingan glared. Cui Dongshan made it clear that he was going to make his own husband work hard. Cui Dongshan chuckled and said, "On the side of the Daquan dynasty, our Bio Palace, where the goddess of the river is buried, will definitely occupy a place for the uncle Gongho." Qin Pingan said softly, "This matter depends on Lu Rao's own wishes. The bigger problem lies in the fact that dadu should not be too straight, otherwise the water will rush into the sea and it will easily take away a continent of mountains and rivers. Along the way, ordinary dynasties and immortal mansions on the mountain cannot be retained, so every time the dadu river is straight, is countless complaints. However, it should not be too winding in twists and turns, otherwise it will easily hurt the transportation of the mountains. At the same time, this means that the cities and farms of many countries will inevitably be flooded by the waters of the Great Dunes, and the people along the way will move away from their homes. One thing is very likely to involve millions or even tens of millions of people. Therefore, every time a tortuous place is blasphemed, it will cause countless criticisms. In addition, dadu, in addition to the excavation of the riverbed, involves a large number of river diversions. Many mountains in the plains, especially in the basin, are very likely to become the old calendar. For the monarchs of the countries who have just restored the country in terms of these, they are all huge losses that are very close at hand, so the weighing of the pros and cons here still involves the extremely complicated and extremely complex disputes of interest in all aspects. In Aquarius, one country is one continent, so you don't have to worry about the pros and cons that are specific to each country. In addition, Dali officials are capable of government affairs, and no one dares to hold back. How does Tonggishao compare? In the final analysis, there are 2 major problems: money and popular support. Qin Pingan looked helpless and said, "The most worry-free and labor-saving thing is to use the god's money to buy the entire road that dadu flows through. If you want to save worry and effort, you have to spend a lot of money and use enough money to fill the pit of people's hearts." Xiaomi Li frowned his 2 faint brows and sighed, "Then how tall and big a mountain of money must be vacated?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "There may be only one person with this financial background, that is Lu Kaishan of Aizhou." Xiaomi Li exclaimed, "That's too rich, but unfortunately I am not familiar with Lu Kaishan of Aizhou. When we met we couldn't speak." Cui Dongshan smiled and reached out and touched the head of the millet grain. The little girl hurriedly bowed her head and shook her head. The big white goose became more and more presumptuous. "Look, this hasn't become the sect master, so she's so courageous and fat." Qin Pingan said, "For specific matters you represent Xian Dushan and are solely responsible. I only help take the lead, but don't feel wronged. First of all, let me come to the Temple of Confucianism and the Academy. Well, maybe in the future the Taoist Nen will also come to Tonggishao to help, one water and one mountain. Just talking about the cost of the relocation, they can already save an astronomical amount of ferry money. In addition, the town Yaolu Qingtong will also contribute. Qingtong served as the second consecration of our Qingping sword sect, so he will definitely not stand idly by. Cui Dongshan smiled and rubbed his hands. Enough, too much. You have to learn, Mr. Shui, accept it when you see it and accept it when you see it. Qin Pingan said, what else? Cui Dongshan told the truth. It turned out that he planned to relocate more old 5 sacred mountains and Shenfu ruins, one after another, to take root in the Zhongmen realm. Many of these old mountain relics fell into the hands of the new reinstated monarchs, and they were tasteless, because the many new Wuxia mountain monarchs who were supported after the war were actually unwilling to open their mansions on the dilapidated old site. A bit unlucky, and those dilapidated hills, not to mention the fact that the mountains were ruined by the monks of the monster race, the surrounding heaven and earth's aura was swept away, it was just a big hole. The mountain king opened his mansion on the old hill. It is really a headache, and the country is restored. The latter emperor and monarch also had their own pragmatic considerations. Not only were they greedy for merit but for the sake of history. After all, not everyone had the opportunity to conjure the mountains in the past dynasties. The monarchs wanted to be prosperous, and the threshold was very high since ancient times. If you change the location of the mountain, you will not only be able to consolidate the Zen mountains, but also help a country's luck, saying goodbye to the old and welcoming the new, just like a new year in the city under the mountain. In this way, Cui Dongshan's family only talks about immortal money, not talking about the pile of natural treasures, and he may be lavishly squandered. So Qingping Jianzong's first sect master also means crying poorly. For the expenses of digging and blaspheming, we are really powerless in the next sect and we can get people out. As for the money, we can only rely on the husband and the upper sect. Qin Pingan shook his sleeves and said with a smile, I really accepted a good student, a proud disciple. No wonder Cui Dongshan deliberately let millet grains walk between the two, because he was worried about being beaten. The third thing is that no money is finally involved. It turned out that it was from the side of Yuguizang who took advantage of the opportunity of Luopishan to create the next sect, and took the initiative to show favor with Xiandushan. He did not hesitate to let Jiu Yifeng's new peak master, the young sword repair Qiu Ji, personally come to Shindu Mountain to participate in the celebration. Qingping Jianzong, do you want to take advantage of the trend and form an alliance with Yuguizang? In fact, each has its pros and cons. Once the alliance is formally formed and the two sides conclude a contract on the mountain, it is equivalent to both sides agreeing to the future landscape of one continent on the mountain. Even if Shindu Mountain does not have such ambitions, at least Yuguizang is willing to unilaterally admit this, which is no small sincerity. If the two sides form an alliance, the previous peach and leaf alliance will become a piece of waste paper. However, if the two parties do not conclude an agreement, it is equivalent to the two sides invisibly drawn a road, using the Daquan dynasty, the Rin River, etc. as the boundary, or the future Dadu as the border. Qingping Jianzong and Yuguizangjing, the water does not offend the river. Once a dispute arises in the future, since there is no incense, then it can only be done on business. Qin Pingan said, you want to do this by yourself, I don't give any opinions or suggestions. Cui Dongshan didn't feel surprised either. He pinched his chin and looked sad. Qin Pingan didn't bother to take a look, who was pretending to show it bitterly. The last thing Cui Dongshan wants to confirm with his husband, what will happen in the next 100 years. Perhaps only this matter for Cui Dongshan and Xia Zong is the most important top priority. Qin Pingan said, first, retreat for a period of time, return to the Jade Realm, and then travel around the vast world, and you will visit several continents that you haven't been to. Zhuhai Dongtian opened a wine shop and did not charge rent, but the most holy master personally promised it. And because of something that Aunt Feng confessed to Dali capital city, Qin Pingan had to take a trip to the 100 Flowers land. As for being the princely guest of the blessed land, it would be avoided. Cui Dongshan asked tentatively, Mr. is retreating on Mishue Peak, right? Qin Pingan said, I returned to Luapa Mountain and gave the Xiadongshan Taoist temple to the children of Chai Wu and King Sun Chun. Cui Dongshan stomped, Millet, hurry up and help the little brother be fair. Millet shook his head, haha said with a smile, I want to go home too. Cui Dongshan said sadly, our Shindu Mountain, isn't it the home of the right guardian? Millet thought for a while and gave the answer in his mind, I don't need to visit the mountain every day. She is clever. On the side of Shindu Mountain, the so-called patrolling of the mountains is that she finds something to do on her own. In Luapa Mountain it's different. From the old cook to Sister Nuanshu, to the Taoist chief Xianhui at the gate of the mountain, and farther to the Qilong alley on the other side of the town, everyone felt that patrolling the mountain, she is not a fool, she is a serious person to do well. Although it is a small matter without a big rice bowl, only zhoumi is done. When Cui Dongshan heard the words of the millet grains, he knew that there was no room for mediation. If he dared to break a sentence, he would probably be trained on the side of the husband. Qin Pingan rubbed the head of the millet grains and asked Cui Dongshan, "How is the specific ranking arranged at the Patriarch Hall?" Regarding the next celebration and the specific process arrangements, Qin Pingan really didn't know in detail. Moreover, different hills have their own family law and rituals. It's too far away. I can't see, I can't reach it, I can't even think about it. When something really happens, it feels like dreaming again. Therefore, the previous ceremony for the creation of the sect of Luapa Mountain, from beginning to end, seemed so sloppy. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Mister, as the lord of the upper sect, of course, there is no need for the abbot to worship the incense ceremony, and the incense is not needed. After all, the portrait of Xia Zongzu Shirtang hanging in the middle is the sect master Qin Pingan himself. How can there be a reason for oneself to respect incense? Of course, this is also because the establishment of Luapa Mountain and Qingping Sword Sect, the upper sect and the lower sect, is one after another. At the beginning of the construction of the vast majority of the next sects in the world, the founder of the previous sect was not visible. They only saw hanging statues and no living people. Cui Dongshan continued, like the long-lived Taoist who is the law of the fallen mountain palm, as well as the old Jia who is the second manager of the wind and kite fairy, because they are all from the previous sect, there is still some difference from the guests. They will follow behind the husband. Before we set aside the genealogy members, we will first respect the incense. As for the position of the 2 rows of seats in the Qingping Peaks Patriarch Hall, there is no fixed rule for the 2 rows of seats on the mountain. According to Mr. S. rules when he went to Chunbanzhai on the Great Wall of Jianghu, it is better to respect the left. For example, the Dali Imperial Court means that the court officials respect the left, and the army respects the right. It's just that in the officialdom, promotion is called right shift, and demoted is called left shift, which is also interesting. The upper row on the left, the lower row on the right to show respect for the lower sect. Without the source of the upper sect, how come the river of the lower sect? But in the future, Qingping Feng, if there are 2 meetings between the upper and lower parties, the seats will need to be changed. According to the general rules, the next Zongzu Shirtang will have a permanent seat except for you. Ming, the chief dedicated to Jianghu, will not arrange a fixed seat for them, because they are not members of Qingping Sword Sect's Patriarch Hall. Then Yao Xianji Yi Yinyun and Huang Ting, these guests will first respect the incense as the guests. Wait until our first meeting of the Patriarch's Hall, and after they have the status of worship and guest, it will be the first time. Formally as my own family, I re-enter the Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. Hey, walk out with your front foot, turn around and go back with your back foot. Cui Dongshan smiled and asked, "Sir, just ask what is the arrangement for the position of the hanging statue in the Zongzi Shitang?" Qin Pingan said in a huff, "Who is the next sect master who is going to have a headache?" Cui Dongshan took out a few pieces of paper from his sleeve. "Please check these lists, sir." 3 sheets of paper. In fact, it's just a play. The genealogical members of the entire next clan, and the members of Qingping Sword Sect's Patriarch Hall, who have seats in Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall, and their respective specific positions in Qingping Sword Sect. The last is to observe the guests. Qin Pingan still took over, looked at it carefully, and saw the 2 names on the last piece of paper and wondered, why are Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui also on the list? Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "In the case of Dadu, my husband intends to bring the Lu family and the Xuanmi dynasty to the Aizhao Island. How foolish is the money?" Qin Pingan frowned slightly. Cui Dongshan immediately said sternly, "Mister, don't worry, they are here. They are only responsible for paying the money in advance and sharing the accounts afterwards. They are not allowed to use the excavation and blasphemy to secretly prop up the puppet temple and the fairy mansion mountain on Tongizhao. It is just that. For this kind of thing, signing a paper contract is actually not very useful. Instead, it requires a gentleman's agreement." Speaking of this, Cui Dongshan began to move sideways. Students have a fart prestige and card face, of course not, absolutely not. So the husband has to go on the horse himself. With a smile on his face, Qin Pingan turned his head and waved to the proud student. Before they knew it, the 3 of them had already reached the foot of Mt. Qin Pingan raised his head and looked at Shindu Mountain, the next sect of Luapa Mountain, and the gate of Qingping Peak. The couplets presented by Wu Shuangjiang will be hung, which is a real treasure of Xinshan. Every word on the couplet is a place of endless rhyme and unity. Before the break, Qin Pingan planned to go to Mishue Peak and meet Zhang Shanfeng first. And Zhang Shanfeng Sr., referring to Shenfeng Yuan Lingyan, is actually a famous guest of his own Luopa Mountain. Let Cui Dongshan busy himself, and let the millet grains continue to stay with Pei Qian, but Qin Pingan walked to the house alone. Yuan Lingyan said that his junior brother Zhang Shanfeng was breathing and had to give up. Because he was just planning to take a short break, Qin Pingan did not go to Xiaodongshan Taoist Temple. After all, there are still many visitors on the mountain, all of whom are climbing for the first time, like the old man Liang Shuang, Yu Guizong and his party, and of course Pu Shanzhang. La Tan Rong. The temporary rest place seemed to have been prepared by Cui Dongshan specially for his junior brother Zhao Shuxia. The house was not big, so after entering the courtyard, Qin Pingan chose a wing room. Qin Pingan just sat down cross-legged and was about to close his eyes for a moment. I found a little girl running up on the road outside the door. After approaching the house, she began to tiptoe and stood quietly, and then acted as the door at the door, holding a green bamboo stick and a golden pole in her arms. Qin Pingan smiled and stood up and walked out the door. In a house not far from Misiefeng, Lu Jinglong looked at the apprentice with droopy eyebrows and smiled and asked, "What's the matter?" Logically speaking, when Qin Pingan returned to Xindu Mountain, Bai Shou should take a reassurance, and no longer have to worry about being beaten by Pei Qian for no reason. Bai Shou's face was full of entanglement, and his head fell dejected and said, "Blame that Bai Xian for giving me a huge problem." Lu Jinglong didn't ask why. The white head asked, "Lu, do you think it is important for face or loyalty to walk alone?" Lu Jinglong smiled and said, "Don't ask me, you figure it out." Bai Shou scratched his head with both hands, annoyed. They are all named Bai, so why bother with the surname Bai? It turned out to be that Bai Xian. There is a booklet that records many names. It is called a hero spectrum and it is full of hardcore heroes. Earlier, Bai Xian asked Bai Shou if we brothers should join in the grand event, so that we can ask someone for justice in the future. If he helped Bai Xian conceal this, Bai Shou always felt that paper couldn't contain the fire and sooner or later he would be cut off. The heroes and heroes whose names are written on the booklet don't even want to run. But if you want to tell Pei Qian to inform, Bai Shou can't get through that hurdle in his heart. It seems that he is too unethical, not Bai Shou's usual style. Don't tell the news. I'm really afraid that Bai Xian, who is stunned, has already secretly recorded his name in the book, and then things will be revealed, a yellow mud in his crotch, not or shit. This makes the white head hesitate, and in the end, I thought it was safe to say that I told the surname Lu about this matter. Even if I was settled by Pei Qian later, I had a witness. Lu Jinglong heard the secret incident and said with a smile, "It's not a problem. To solve the bell you must tie the bell." "What do you mean?" The white head was confused and annoyed. "It's never meant to ask me to say something to Pei Qian in a huff, don't think about it. A big man, it doesn't matter how many times he has been beaten. Even though it's a glorious defeat, I have to take the initiative to subdue it. Let her eat the fart." Bai Shou hurriedly shut up. Lu Jinglong said helplessly, "I mean to ask you to find Qin Pingan, and you want to see me as a witness. It is better to find Pei Qian's master to help." The white head palms with a boxing, "Wonderful." Outside the door there are two people, one big and one small. Qin Pingan in the green shirt, the little girl in black. Qin Pingan knocked on the door of the house, smiled and took the millet grains across the threshold. This guy went over the wall and entered the yard without knocking. Bai Shou couldn't care about this trivial matter. Anyway, the entire Mishue Peak was the site of his own brother. After Bai Shou got up, he laughed and said, "Qin Pingan, you have heard about it, and Bai Xian was beaten up in the future. On my side, you have to help explain clearly to Pei Qian." Qin Pingan crossed the threshold and nodded with a smile. "Of course there is no problem." At this moment, patronizing his cheerful white head, obviously has not realized the seriousness of the problem. Millet grains, two things have been silently noted. One big event was the heroic book about Bai Xian. There is another little thing, that is, the Peak Master of Pianran Peak, the Golden Pill Sword Fairy and White Head, directly address our good mountain masters by his name. The big event in the front involved the grievances of the rivers and lakes. But if someone accidentally misses the little thing behind it, it's probably not a big problem, right? Lu Jinglong glanced at the millet grains, and then shifted his vision, and found that Qin Pingan was suffocating it. Lu Jinglong coughed. Bai Shou was not stupid. He was shocked and immediately squeezed out a bright smile, saying, "Xiaomi Li, remember to help me with today's affairs, mainly to help Bai Xian keep it secret." Xiaomi Li immediately said with a serious face, I absolutely don't know any booklet, I have never heard of it. Baisho felt that everything was in order and waved his big hand. Brother, sit down and talk, drink and drink. Qin Pingan was about to take out a pot of wine from his sleeve. Lu Jinglong smiled and said, in Dali capital I have already met Han Zhoujin. Thanks to someone I am not small, and when I saw me girl Han was very polite. Without further ado he took out 2 pots of Changchun stuff which had been prepared long ago. Of course it is 2 pots per person. For fear that sect master Lu might not be able to drink, Han Zhoujin said that there are still a few pots left. Qin Pingan shook his sleeves and got up from the chair and said, I'm going to see Zhang Shanfeng, so I won't chat with you for now. Lu Jinglong said with a puzzled face, I just came here, now I'm leaving, don't you want a drink? I saw that Qin Shanju was full of righteousness and said, which one of us is with whom? It is not bad for this meal. When the celebration is over we will talk about it later. Anything that is not polite, don't say, will be acceptable. Walking out of this house, Xiaomi Li lowered his voice and asked softly, Good man Mountain Lord, Sect Master Lu has been persuaded to drink again? Qin Pingan nodded and said, Yeah, what a good thing Lu De Jiangxian has a good drinking capacity, he is famous and I can't envy him. After that, Qin Pingan knocked on the door of a house, and the one who opened the door was the old real man Liang Shuang, surnamed De Xianxia outside Longhushan. As for Ma Xianhui who lives in the side room, he is a cultivator and often sleeps lightly before he truly attains the Tao. This young female champion quickly walked out of her wing and looked at the 3 people chatting around the table in the main room. Earlier, I heard Master mention the real reason for the great vision of Tong Yezhou, and I knew it at this young age. Ma Xianhui became more and more in awe of the next man in the blue shirt. Master sighed at that time. In the future, the younger generation of monks will treat him as a land god. Just looking at the man in the green shirt, and then at the little black girl sitting on the same bench with him, who was sipping wine, especially when he raised his head, smiled with her and called the girl Ma Xianhui nodded in greeting, smiled shyly and hurried back to the house. For some reason, for no reason, Ma Xianhui felt that he was a little afraid of him. After that, Qin Pingan took the millet grains to the place where Pushen Yunkatang was settled on Mishue Peak, the house of Lao Zhanglu. Seeing Qin Pingan, Tan Rong smiled bitterly and clasped his fists. Qin Pingan clasped his fists in return and apologized. Before in Yun Chaotang, the juniors did not intentionally conceal their identity. Tan Rong said, Can you ask Mr. Chen for how many seals? The old monk wanted to say a seal, but he quickly changed his words. Qin Pingan nodded and agreed and asked if Tanzanglu had any seals he liked. Tan Rong only said that it all depends on Mr. Chen's freedom. On the side of Mishue Peak, a relatively rare mansion with deep courtyards and a veranda turning point was specially used to receive monks from the great sect genealogy. It had been idle all the time, but when the monk Yu Guizong came together to observe the ceremony, it happened to come in handy. On a night visit, Qin Pingan saw the ancestor hall of Yu Guizong, the king of Yupu realm enshrined. There is also the peak master of Jiui Feng, a genius sword repairer who can only be regarded as a child, Qiuji. And the direct disciples of Yu Guizong's contemporary Lord Wei Ying, 2 young Jindan realm sword repairmen, senior brother Wei Gisu, and junior sister Wei Xianyu. There is also an old man named Zhang Fenggu with the road name Old Elephant, sitting on the main seat. In addition, the young master Jiang Hang and the group of Yunku Fudi, and the great sword fairy Su Hao, who belongs to the outsider of Yu Guizong, did not show up. Regarding this old ancestor of Yu Guizong, who is of the same generation as the old Lord Xuanhuan, he is an immortal. The reason why Zhang Fengguzi did not show up in the previous battle where Yu Guizong was besieged by the monster clan, the old monk had his own difficulties. Because of this person's roots and feet, Qing Tong took the initiative to reveal the secret. According to legend, the largest dynasty in Tonggishao in the past years built an elephant house. Over time, each has spirituality. It is possible to kneel and bow for 3 times with the monarch, fairy teacher, and the group of elephants. There is only one old elephant, which is still ancient. Therefore, the dynasty once asked Dan Qing to paint a memorial to the group elephants, most of which were huge and charming, but this old elephant was completely different. Qin Pingan only saw this child named Qiu Ji at the first glance, and he felt a little close to him. At first glance there is an eye. And Qiu Ji, after seeing this famous hidden officer with his own eyes, it is almost the same, very different from the imagined image of hidden officer, sword immortal, and sect master. Even if you don't feel domineering, you won't be sharp. Even if a Taoist person is introverted, talkative, willing to be pleasant and approachable, it's hard to be like the young elders on the mountain in the end. making Qiuji feel the other person seems to be on an equal footing with others all the time. When Qin Pingan was chatting with Zhang Finggu and Wang Ji, he couldn't help looking at Qiuji. Such a little old child is already a Dragon Gate realm sword repairman. And it seemed that Qiuji had already felt the bottleneck of the Dragon Gate realm, and it would soon be the golden core. Qin Pingan almost blurted out, and in the future he would go to Yuguazhang Jiaifeng to attend the ceremony. Only thinking of the purpose of the other party's trip, Qin Pingan had to forcibly hold back these words, and only said a seemingly very polite remark. Yuguazhong has a successor. I left and found Yao Xinji with the millet grains. Qin Pingan asked softly, the old general is asleep? Yao Xinji nodded and said helplessly, I finally fell asleep because my grandfather felt that he was blaspheming, and finally he got a brow. He originally planned to watch the night until dawn, but after all, Grandpa is too old to be a sleepy bug. Qin Pingan laughed softly, when the old general wakes up in the morning, tell him that Tong Yesus blasphemy is covered by me in Shindu Mountain. Yao Xinji was surprised, really? Qin Pingan smiled and said, is this something to be joking about? On the other side of the wing room opposite to Yao Xianzi's house, the lights turned yellow faintly through the window paper. It is Li Xiling, an old book from the Ministry of Etiquette, who is still reading at night. The old man also has another identity, he is the uncle of the current His Majesty the Emperor Daquan. Lao Shangshu once personally accompanied Cui Dongshan on a trip to the northern Jin dynasty, and it was under this person's matchmaking bridge that he bought an old mountain, which is now the Ximiao Mountain. The new emperor of the northern Jin kingdom was very courageous. He only offered 50 grain rain coins, and suggested that Master Cui would only need 200 grain rain coins if he was willing to take all of the old Wuxia mountain. This is not sold but is equivalent to giving away for nothing. It's just certain transactions under the sun, and in many cases, it's really not just a matter of money. For example, if it is just a mountain where Jin Dan Dixian sits, even if the price doubles or even quadruples, the price of 800 grain rain money with the northern Jin dynasty will be offered, and the 5 old mountains must be packaged and bought. It is estimated that from the emperor himself to the ruling and opposition parties, they will only feel that they are humiliating and even provoking the northern Jin kingdom. Lao Shangshu, who is looking to read books and keeps the years old, has a deep family history, rich collection and fine appreciation. He is the first-rate son of the Daquan dynasty, and he is also recognized as a young prodigy and romantic talent. Until he met Yao Xianzi's aunt, he completely received his heart. At the beginning, in order to marry her because the Yao family of the frontier army adhered to a family ancestral motto, he did not want or dared to marry the high gate of the capital, and was worried that he would be jealous of the Emperor Li of Daquan. People finally get married. However, Li Xiling, who is a book of rights because his father was a former book of officials, and now in Daquan court, many things are not blindly close to the emperor, protégés, faintly partisans, plus the elders of the former dynasty, most of whom rely on Li Xiling. Under the gate, there are also a group of young and strong-aged Qinglu civilian officials, as well as several military commanders from the frontier army. From the temple to the place, roughly 3 forces have formed, intertwined. Since the Daquan dynasty was a rare woman to proclaim the emperor, the former cousin of the Yao family became a noble member of the royal family, now headed by Yao Xinji, who served as the capital of the capital. Qin Pingan let the millet grain stay on Yao Xianzi's side. He went to knock on the door of the opposite room, and when he saw the old man walking out in his cloak, he said, Qin Pingan, a lineage of Wenxing, has seen Li Shangshu. Because Li Xiling went to Dafu Academy to study when he was young, and he studied with an academy gentleman, so he was not just a Confucian student in a broad sense, but also a student of the academy. As a scholar who reads sages and sages every day, Li Xiling can't show his cowardice no matter who he sees. The old Shangshu, who was still a little bit sullen, suddenly smiled and hurriedly returned the courtesy, but when he got up, the old man had already smiled slightly and said, I can't afford it, I can't afford to be a gift from Mr. Chen. There is no shortage of topics with Li Xiling. After all, Qin Pingan is familiar with the Daquan dynasty, so after being dragged by Lao Shangshu and chatting for a full hour, Qin Pingan was able to get away. After that, Qin Pingan took the millet grains to Pei Qian's side, and found that Chao Sunny was sitting beside the brazier, and there was also a Mi de Jianxian who seemed to be waiting for the rabbit here. The millet grains began to take out the seeds from the messenger cotton bag, and divided the seeds into the seeds. Except for those staying in Luapa Mountain and Qilong Lane, Zheng Dafeng is in the colorful world. Chief Zhou and Wei Xian all went to the barren world. Lu Baixiang, among the 4 in the painting scroll of Uwafuti, came to 2 direct disciples with Yuan Baoan, and had his own school. The 9 sword fairy embryos brought back by Qin Pingan from the Great Wall of Jianxi, including Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangting, have been enshrined in Yu on the Luapa mountain following the old Jianxiu to travel to other continents. Chen Lingjun and Guizhujiu, Qin Pingan's current young disciple, are still on the side of Lushan in Ao Pingzhou, watching the opening ceremony of the Huangliang sect. Unknowingly, time passed and the cotton satchel of millet grains was thick. At dawn, the sky was bright outside the house. There is a waning moon outside the sky with several stars, the smoke of Spring Mountain is about to collect, and the sound of chickens shouting to retreat to Maodian Moon in the world outside the mountain. Qin Pingan stood up and smiled, "I'll go to rest for a while." About half an hour before the next festival, the genealogical members of Luapa Mountain and Shindu Mountain, together with the guests, began to arrive at the square outside Qingping Peak's Patriarch Hall one after another. In fact, the first group of people who were there were the millet grains. They were 1 hour away and they had already arrived here. In addition to millet grains, there were also Bai Xian, Chai Wu and Sun Chun kings. They were a small mountain. Of course there is Jia Sheng who is busy with people and things early. Planting autumn will come to the square later than the old fairy Jia. When the cultivator who was about to be the next accountant and the god of wealth arrived, Jia Sheng naturally stood behind the cultivator, and there was not much to talk. More and more visitors to Shindu Mountain showed up in the square outside Qingping Feng Zushiteng. However, some of these guests will soon change their identities. At the moment, there are 3 people in the Daquan dynasty: the old general Yao Zhen, and the Daquan Mirage Jingqing Mansionin Yaxianzi. Li Shiling, the Book of Etiquette. Taiping Mountain female crown Huang Ting, Yupu realm sword repair. Next to Huang Ting, stood a guardian who returned to her hometown from Wuxia Tianxia. The newly acquired mountain was enshrined in Negative Mountain, with the road name Negative Mountain. A pair of mentors and apprentices came from the Taishu Mountain in the Middle Earth. As expected, the immortal, named Dragon Gate, brought his disciples to talk about Yingzhou. Next to the master and apprentice, there is also a direct disciple of Qin Pingan brother Jun Qian, Zheng Yugan. Pushan Yun Xiaoteng, the mountain master Yi Yun Yun, the big disciple Shuai Pushan Zhang Lv Tan Rong. Zhongtu Shenzhou, surnamed Tianshi outside Longhushan, Liang Shuang. The old true man was on Tongyi's his side and accepted a disciple, Ma Xianhui, the crown lady. Beiju Luzhou is lying on the top of the mountain, a pair of brothers Yuan Lingdian and Zhang Shanfeng. Yuguizong Jiu Feng, the new peak master, sword repairman in the Dragon Gate realm, Yang Qiuji. Jiang's Cloud Cave blessed land, Jiang Shangzhen's eldest son Jianghuan. Sovereign Wei Ying's 2 concubines Jianxiu, Nianjiu and Suiyu. The real names are Wei Gisu and Wei Xianyu. The ancestor hall of Shenzhanfeng enshrines Wang Ji and Yupu realm. Aiizhou Liu's Gesh Qing driven mountain crossing, the sword fairy Su Hao, an outsider. Jiangheng is about to meet Qin Pingan for the 2nd time. Last time I was on Hohot Island, one of the intercontinental ferry boats in Old Longqing, and went to Upside Down Mountain. At that time the identity and realm of the 2 sides were quite different. The old Dada Longgong teacher mother was born, and the old Chudu is Chudu. The only direct disciple of the old woman, the engagement shop on the banks of the Jilin River, the girl Hu Chuling, nicknamed Vinegar and Vinegar. Zhong Kuei took the fat man Eugene with the identity of a ghost and called himself Gusu. Wei Xianyu secretly looked at the sword immortal Mi Daijian who was in white clothes Xingxua. It looks really good. Su Hao took the initiative to find Pei Qian. This unsmiling sword fairy Su Jun saw Pei Qian, his face showed a rare smile. Pei Qian clasped his fists in a salute. In that Jinjiaza battlefield, 1 sword fairy and 1 swordman, the 2 sides have fought side by side several times. In fact, Su Hao was willing to use Guizhong this time, just thinking of being able to chat with Pei Qian. This young great sword immortal from Jin Jiazhou looking at Pei Qian's eyes, is similar to a younger generation who looks at his own family with great promise. Su Hao also asked Pei Qian when he would travel to Jinjiazu again, and greet him when he was there, saying that he was there and he was still on the mountain. Zhong Kuei had a very happy chat with the old general Yao Zhen. Fatty Eugene's eyes were not idle, and when he saw the young female champion Ma Xianhui, he was deeply moved. Sui took her disciple Cheng Chaolu to the right. She stood with Huang Ting and asked about some of the terroirs of the colorful world. Yu Jishan was chatting with the old woman Chudu. Yu Guizhong and his party stood together with Lu Jinglong, the lord of Taihui Jianzong, and the white head of Pianranfeng Peak. Bai Shou deliberately or unintentionally avoided that Bai Xian. Yuan Lingdian and the fairyland with the road named Dragon Gate really got together, because Master Huolong is an old acquaintance with Gua Outing. In the square, after learning that the little spirit named Jing Yugan turned out to be Lu Xix's high apprentice, many people couldn't help but look more. Since he is Lu Shila's disciple, he is Qin Pingan's nephew according to his cultural heritage. When Sheng's lineage, how the atmosphere is, several worlds are clear. Xiao Mo stood with a group of Shindu Mountain's newest genealogical monks. In fact, the latter didn't even know how sacred this fellow with yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo sticks was. In this way Qing Tong seemed a little alone. Then in the square there was a sudden silence, but soon they continued to talk about each other, obviously just feeling a little surprised and didn't take it too seriously. Because just now, 3 people appeared inexplicably, Aizhou Lu Kaishan, with his only son Lu Yuzhou beside him. In addition there is the supreme emperor of the Xian secret dynasty, Yu Panshui. Both sides showed up here in a way recognized as the most upstart on the mountain. Lu Jubao took the initiative to hold a fist and salute the old real man Liang Shuang, while Lu Yuzhou swam around and saw her immediately. Yu Panshui walked to Cui Dongshan and Chao Qingqing, who stood side by side. There is still a piece of incense sticking kung fu before the celebration. From the mountain road connecting Mishue Peak and Qingping Peak, there is a sword repairer, Tao Ran, who is going to step on a spot to participate in the opening of the mountain celebration. Hearing the footsteps behind him, he turned his head and looked at the man in the blue shirt who had a fate on the banks of the Rin River, but today he did not wear 2 swords, instead he replaced him with a back sword. There are so many tricks. The man followed Tao Ran's footsteps and greeted with a smile, Tao Jianxian. Tao Ran nodded with a dark face. Qin Pingan said, "Don't worry, today's celebration will not be held for too long, and everything will be kept simple." Tao Ran said, "Whatever, I can sit on the chair and doze off after I hang the statue on the wall with incense." Qin Pingan nodded and smiled, "Of course it's okay." Tao Ran said directly, "As Mr. Siu's elders, the opening ceremony is not a trivial matter on the mountain. You are not in a hurry. It's a bit outrageous, right?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Anyway, I'm already busy, so why should I take a break from my busy schedule now?" Tao Ran asked casually, "Have you turned on Jinghua Shueiyue?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "No, I can't do the fancy thing about swollen face and fat man." Tao Ran smiled and said, "Yes. It's not easy to be able to put the matter of having no money in your pocket so grandly." Tao Ran said in a bad mood, "Don't take a bite of Tao Jiangxians in the future, I don't like to listen. If you leave it before, just my temper is equivalent to asking me about the sword." Qin Pingan smiled and nodded, Okay. After bypassing a small road, the vision of both parties suddenly opened up, and as they climbed up the steps, it was the Bayou Square outside the Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. This time it was truly silent. Tao Ran nodded secretly, "Don't look at the small mountain top, never thought that the rules of the house are quite heavy. As for the guests, how many celestial immortals can come from Tongyi's house today?" Then we Tao Jianxian saw that. Xuanhuan. Tao Ran used to cultivate wildly in the mountains, unwilling to deal with the mountains. No one can recognize anyone. He would never recognize Yi Yunyun, who is both a great beauty and a boundless martial artist. Wait a minute, how does that man look at Lu Kaishan, who looks so much like Aizhou? And why is the style of Yugizang Jianxiu looking at the style of dressing in saber? Just to deceive a golden core sword with a broken life sword? Yu Shindu Mountain wouldn't have such a big battle, right? Next to Tao Ran, I saw everyone on the square heading to his side together. Everyone looked solemn and saluted. On the peak of Qingping, the swordsman in Qingshan, smiling and holding his fists in return. End of this chapter. Sword of Coming Chapter 958. Tao Ran swallowed, bit his scalp, boldly asked in his heart, "Who are you really?" Tao Jianxian didn't even dare to call his name directly, it was too shameful. Qin Pingan smiled and replied in his heart, "Last time I was on the banks of the river, I had already said it. If nothing else, it would be me." Tao Jianxian didn't believe it. "You let Lao Tzu believe it. I saw a young man casually on the way with a pair of knives hanging around his waist, and a blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, and then claiming to be Qin Pingan. I was stupid to believe it. It's like a man on the horizon suddenly walking to the front, and walking out of the book like a man in a book." Today Cui Dongshan, who is wearing a white dress with a sword, stretched out his thumb towards Tao Ran in the distance, while Mi De Jiangxian on the side winked at Tao Jianxian. Before the auspicious hour of the opening ceremony, Qin Pingan hurried forward and exchanged greetings with the guests. Taking advantage of this opportunity, His brain was filled with sword repairs and he looked left. Looking at the right, he chose a place for himself to stay. Finally, Qin Pingan took the hand of his nephew Zheng Yugan and stopped at a small mountain head, at the extreme edge. These will soon become the genealogy of the Qingping Peak of Shindu Mountain. Monk, it's funny to say that most of them still don't know the true identity of the sword fairy in front of them. After they came to the square before, they gathered together subconsciously, but there was nothing to chat with each other. When the square was crowded after that, it was obviously more cramped and restrained. At this moment, Qin Pingan clasped his fists and smiled and said, "I formally introduce myself. My surname is Qin and my name is Pingan. I am a native of Longquan County in Longquan County of Aquarius. Soon, the Wenxing who restored the Confucian Temple, I am also the husband of Cui Dongshan, Pei Qian and Chao Qingqing." This is also the first time Qin Pingan has revealed the identity of the Shangzong Mountain Lord and has a serious dialogue with them. Qin Pingan touched the heads of the children next to him, and introduced with a smile, "Zheng Yugan is Brother Junqian's disciple and my nephew." At this moment, the group of people standing opposite Qin Pingan, except for Tao Ran who was born in Tonghishao Shanzai's Jindanjian repairer. There are also two immortals and ghosts who are a pair of Taoists, who are proficient in formations Wu Go and Xiao Menying. 3 exiled monks from the old Yezigang Shi Tower, Lan Yi, Yu Xinglo and Fu Zhu. His true identity is Xiao Poxian, the fallen prince of the old Zhuang dynasty in Beipingzu, and the maid Ming Long who followed him to the north and south and had a long escape career. She has now changed her name to Dugu Misty, and Tong Yezhou is about to usher in the second female monarch. For this pair of masters and servants, Cui Dongshan had previously asked Xiao Mo to help with blindfolding. Next to the two, there was also a female cultivator, Shiqiu, who came from Luzhou Dajiao Mountain in Beiju. Qin Pingan looked at Shiqiu. Shiqiu pursed his lips and smiled, nodding lightly. Qin Pingan once again clasped his fists to thank. Xiandushan founded the Zongmen from site selection to construction, to today's celebration. In fact, every link is extremely hasty, and within a short time, Xiandushan Zhufeng has this scale, which is equivalent to setting up a ferry on the ground and starting from nothing. Everyone has worked hard. Leaving aside the 3 old Laopishan men from Shaopoxian, Jianxiu Tao Ran who took over the shop on the Rin River, as well as the 2 groups of monks Wu Go and Yujigang Lan Yi, were all brought to Shindu Mountain by Cui Dongshan himself. Yes, so it can be regarded as the veteran of the establishment of the mountain following Cui Dongshan. The 2 parties used to contribute mainly to the construction of the wind kite ferry and the construction of the ferry. The wind kite of one of the intercontinental ferry boats, no matter the number of members or the combat power, itself is equivalent to a small school on the mountain. On the ferry, Cui Dongshan carefully refined the talisman puppets and golden armored warriors. There are nearly 100 of them. They are named Yugong, Jinshi, Taishenging, Moyuer, etc. Whether they are skins or mines, they are all related to each other. Real people are no different. Responsible for the daily maintenance of the Fengyuan ferry and the geographical survey on the ferry route. The main responsibility of the latter is actually to hunt for treasures in the mountains and rivers of Tonghishao. Therefore, they were sealed by Cui Dongshan as a temporary official position. Landscape inspection, and Wu Go and Xiao Menying, who are proficient in formation, are responsible for the daily operation of Fengyuan ferry. Qin Pingan and Xiao Poxian said in their hearts, "I have seen Shanjun Jinqing. You set up a country on the banks of the river. Let's talk about it later." Xiao Poxian smiled and nodded in thanks. Qin Pingan smiled and asked, "When will you be among the 5 realms?" Xiao Poxian looked sad, difficult. In addition to these weird landscape inspections, there are more than 200 talismans and organ puppets whose ranks are far lower than those of Yugong and Yuer. There are as many as 200 coolies. Dushan Mansion and Ferry are all contributing their efforts, and the 3 monks from Yezigang Shuyalu were temporarily ferry supervisors. They are all young and over 100 years old, and they are not high in their realm now. 2 views of the sea in 1 cave. In fact, before Qin Pingan arrived, the 3 of them were completely frightened. Because of the small chats of the many guests around, no one deliberately used their heartfelt words. For example, the young woman with a ball and hair bun is no stranger. He often meets at the ferry and knows her name is Pei Qian, but how can she be with that? The famous female master Zheng Qian hooked up? After Pei Qian talked about the Jinjiazhou War with the man she respected as Su Jianxian through Pei Qian, and mentioned Chao Ci, Yu Yufu and others, Pei Qian also took the initiative to mention that he had met an old man in purple. Immortal Fu Lu Yuxian. In this way the man's identity was revealed, and it was the Jinjia's great sword immortal, Su Hao, who was known as the sword immortal Su Jun. The guest of the Lu family from Ia's Hao, after crossing the continent to Tongyi's Hao, he settled on the side of Kishandu. According to the tidbits reported by several Shanshuadi, I heard that it was to prevent Yu Guizhong from making several ferry boats to Liu's family. Xia Zhizi Yu Guizhong specially sent the Zushitang to worship Wang Ji, to confront the sword fairy Su Jun, in the drive of Shandu. It just so happened that Wang Ji was here today, and he also took the child who was less than 10 years old, who turned out to be the new peak owner of Yuguizhong Joyifeng. Xuanhuan Yun. She was selected as one of the top 10 martial arts masters in Tongyi's history, and Wu Tan, the martial sage, are the only two end-of-life martial arts in Tongyi's Hao. And that old man turned out to be the first of the top 10 dynasties of Tongyi's Hao, the grandfather of Yao Jinji, the current female emperor of the Dequan dynasty, and the old general Yao Zhen. There are two people beside the old man. One is the Xianxia of the Ministry of Rites, and the young man with a lame leg and broken arm is Lord Fu Yin from Dequan Mirage City. In addition, as well as claiming to be a monk from Taishishan in the Middle-earth God Island, there are also two Taoist priests from Badi Peak in Luzhou, Beiju. Isn't that a rebiography of the real fire dragon, or even a direct disciple? They said with Master Cui Xian beforehand that they can guarantee that the three infamous people, while preserving the identity of Yezigang genealogy monk, will be able to eat in Shindu Mountain, at least not having to linger outside and get stunned. After all, the sect of Yezigang was destroyed and it was an open door. Finally, an old throne demon Chiyun took the lead in climbing the mountain. The massacre was exhausted, especially the beautiful repairs. The end was terrible, but now almost all the local monks in Tongyi's Hao, I feel that Yezigang is to blame. In fact, the three fellows of Lan Yi are satisfied enough with this. It is hard to say how grateful to the Master Cui, but it is definitely not an exaggeration to say that he is sincerely grateful to Shindu Shanyu. Even if Mr. Cui speaks directly, he has made clear his intentions early, that is, he has taken a fancy to their unique craftsmanship secreted by Shuyi building. What does it matter? There is a place to live, and you can share the accounts together to earn money, not to mention that Cui Xianxia will not ask them for the Shuyi's secret method for refining talisman beauty. Chen Pingon didn't use his heartfelt words and directly said to the three of them, "You only need to practice peacefully on Shindu Mountain. Someday you want to regain your old identity. Wait until you feel that the time is right in all aspects, even if you take the initiative to ask for it." Breaking away from the Shindu Mountain genealogy, I can replace Cui Dongshan to assure you that there will be no obstacles on Shindu Mountain, renew the incense inheritance of Yezigang Shuyi Tower, and even rebuild Yezigang. Shindu Mountain will be slightly thinner. In addition, if you are willing, on our side of Shindu Mountain, you will see people's hearts for a long time, and you can trust Sect Master Cui in Shindu Mountain. Then the two sides will formally become allies on the mountain. Before that, you can take the initiative to find scattered places. For the monks from Yezigang, Shindu Mountain will take out a mountain as a temporary dojo to specially house them. Lan Yi and the three people seem to have eaten a big reassurance pill, which was simply a big surprise. They alone don't even have a monk from the earth immortal. In their lifetime, rebuilding the Shuyi Tower is a great luxury, let alone renewing the incense for the entire Yezigang Patriarch Hall. Cui Dongshan smiled knowingly. The husband obviously said it deliberately to everyone present. The husband is going to make his own conclusion about the destruction of Yezigang. Probably from the husband's point of view, if the times are troubled and you are destined to not tolerate a dizzy Yezigang, then Tongyi's Hao will inevitably need a Yezigang in the future of Taiping. Therefore, no matter how the whole Tongyi's Hao views the incident at Yezigang from Ao Pingzhou Luapa Mountain to Tongyi's Hao Qingping Jianzong, they are willing to renew the incense for Yezigang. Cui Dongshan is full of energy. That's great. The more you can manage, the better. I'm afraid that Mr. will completely be the shopkeeper of shaking hands. From now on, if you are not enthusiastic about Shindu Mountain and don't care about it, then you are a proud student. How worried you are. Cui Dongshan came to Tao Ran, bumped Tao Jianxian with his elbow and said with a heartfelt smile, "Tao Jianxian, tell you a few things. First of all, Jiangshang is really our Shindu Mountain Shangzong, the chief consecration of Luapa Mountain, but with I've got a pseudonym called Zhou Fei. Sovereign Jiang is in our Laopao Mountain, his temper is old and his reputation is very strong, so if you become a member of Shindu Mountain's Patriarch Hall, what if you scold him a few words?" Mouthful. Surprise is not a surprise? Tao Ran sullen his face and silently told himself that even Qin Pinyin is really Qin Pinyin, and it is a trivial matter not to scold Jiangshang. Then it's the you me that's an unobtrusive look at you, it's me you, the me from the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Is it unexpected? Tao Ran carefully glanced from the corner of his eyes. Miyu Tao Jianxian smiled awkwardly and rubbed his waist subconsciously, always feeling chilly. In fact, from Qin Pingan to Xiaomo to Miyu Tao Ran has already been scolded. As the senior sister of Shilu Lan Yi cried with joy and choked up, "Why should Mr. Qin treat us three unknown people so kindly?" Qin Pingan gave his own answer, "I don't talk about the merits and demerits of that tragic change, nor the established facts that made a big mistake. I only talk about one thing. If there is no compassion, why open the door?" Qin Pingan said, "The journey is bumpy and there is a long way to go. During this process, there will definitely be a lot of criticism. You should be mentally prepared early." Then Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Of course, if you give up this idea someday and feel it's too difficult, you'll do your best and you're still unable to do it. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Wei Xiandushan also welcomes you. At that time, King Pingfeng Patriarch Hall will arrange a chair for one of you." Lan Yi, Yuxinglo, Fu Zhu, the trio and the two suzerains Qin Pingan and Cui Dongshan expressed their gratitude. The auspicious time has come. Chao Sunny took out the key and opened the gate of King Pingfeng Patriarch Hall. Qin Pingan and Cui Dongshan, Mr. and students walked side by side into the gate, crossed the threshold, and took the lead towards the main hall of the Patriarch Hall. As the ancestral mountain of Shindu Mountain in King Pingfeng Patriarch Hall, only one scroll is hanging at the moment. The ancestor of Shangzong, Qin Pingan, the lord of Luapa Mountain. The green shirt carries the sword on his back, and the hasta is not on his head. Extremely expressive. In the end, Cui Dongshan still didn't follow the instructions of Mr. and hung the three hanging statues of Ji Sifeng Zushitang in the center, and then hung the portraits of him and Cui Dongshan on the left and right ends respectively. Today, the celebration of the establishment of the next sect in Shindu Mountain is still as usual. Like the previous Luapa Mountain, there is no red tape, and it is extremely simple and not cumbersome. In the Patriarch Hall, there are 2 rows of chairs on the left and the other on the right. On the first sect, Luapa Mountain, Izong Shindu Mountain Qingping Jianzong. On one side is Qin Pingan, Changming and Wei Wenlong. Pei Qian Zhoumi Li Xiaomo Jia Sheng Zhang Jiaxin. Rear seats, Nailan Yubi by Xian Sun Chun Wang Chai Wu. 12 people in total. On the other side there is Cui Dongshan, Wonderland. Miyu, a sword repairer in Wonderland. Cui Wei Yuaning Realm Sword Repair. Cultivation of Autumn, the pinnacle of Wufu in the remote travel world. On the right of the Sui Dynasty, Yuaning Realm Sword Repair. Chao Sunny, Brother Jindan. Tao Ran Golden Core Realm Sword Repair. In the back row there is Xiao Poxian Yuaning Jing Jianxiu. Menglong Shiqiu. Go to Jiang. Yuxianhui Qingchalu Higu. Wu Go Xiao Menying, 2 immortals and ghosts. Lani Yuxinglo Fuzhu. A total of 19 people. There are 31 members in the upper and lower cases. Behind the 2 rows of chairs on the left and right, there are seats for the guests. One is a native of Tonggishao behind Cui Dongshan, the other is a foreigner on Qin Pingan's side. Dequan Dynasty Yao Zhen, Fuyin Yao Xinji, Li Shiling the Book of Rites. Taiping Mountain is the master of Huangting, and the mountain is enshrined in Negative Mountain. Pushun Thatched Cottage, the mountain master Yi Yunyun Zhang Lv Tan Rong Shuahui. Zhang Fenggu, the ancestor of Yuguizang, enshrines Wang Ji Qiuji, the master of Jui Peak Wei Gusu Wei Xianyu and Jiangheng, the blessed land of Yunku. Qiudu Hu Chuling. Zhong Kue Eugene. The town's demon building is the same. Long Hushan, the surnamed Great Celestial Master Liang Shuang Ma Xianhui. Litafeng refers to Xianfeng Yuanling Hall and Zhang Shanfeng. Taihui Jianzong, the Lord Lu Jinglong, the white head of Pian Ranfeng. Taishishan really talk about Ingzhou. Jing Yugan. Jin Jiazis Greatsword Fairy Suhao. Ai Zhou Lu Jubao Lu Yuzhou. Middle-earth Shenzhou Mysterious Dynasty Yupan Shui. 2 groups of guests, a total of 35 people. The seating arrangements on both sides are also very interesting because there is no arrangement at all and everyone just sits down. Last time at the Jai's Peak of Luapa Mountain, Xuanhuan and Zhou Mili were responsible for handing incense. This time King Pingfeng was replaced by Chao Qingqing and Zhou Mili, each holding a pot of incense. And the last time Luapa Mountain established the sect celebration, the ancestors of the Patriarch Hall of Jisa Peak were honored with incense. 43 patriarchs of Patriarch Hall of Pei's Peak were in front, and 36 people who watched the ceremony were in the back. This time, the next sect worshipping incense ceremony, except for Qin Pingan, who is the ancestor of Shangzong, does not need to respect the incense, wearing a green shirt, just standing in the position headed on the left. After all the people worshipped the incense in turn, they looked for chairs to sit down. Zhong Kuei could obviously feel Qin Pinggan's embarrassment. Too young and promising is not good. There was a person standing there alone, and then he was tasted by the great Tianshi outside Longhushan, the of Wealth Lius and Yupan Shui. Fat Eugene feels helpless and always feels that he has suffered a great loss. Just thinking that Zhong Kuei would have to negotiate with Qin Pinggan to get back 50% of his family status for himself, so he endured it. Zhang Shanfeng was also holding back his laugh. Qing Tong finds it very interesting. After that, Cui Dongshan took Chao Qingqing and Luopashan right guardian Zhou Mili, according to the customary mountain rules, first went to unveil the 2 plaques of the mountain gate and the ancestor hall. Qingping Jianzong. At the foot of Qingping Peak, I had to erect the ladder honestly and hang up the pair of couplets presented by Wu Shuangjiang. Then he returned to the Patriarch Hall. If it weren't for Xindu Mountain's intention to keep everything simple, there will be a respected monk who will serve as a roll call official, and will be responsible for reading aloud some of the ancestors, heads of immortals, and dynasties who have not been there in person. Of various congratulations. Generally, the next sect ceremony in the awe-inspiring world because of the foundation of the previous sect and the passion of various incense, it may only be this part, often it will take half an hour or even longer because congratulations are often as many as hundreds of copies. Skip this link. Cui Dongshan began to introduce all the people present step by step, starting from the Shangzong Luapa Mountain, then the Qingping Sword genealogy monk and finally the guests. The next step is the longevity of Luapa Shan's Hanglu, announcing the members of the Patriarch Hall of Qingping Sword sect. Qin Pinggan. The first Lord Cui Dongshan, the master of the law Cui Wei, the chief worshipper Miyu, was in charge of a financial planting autumn. On the right of the Sui dynasty Chao Sunny, Tao Ran Wu Go and Xiao Menying. After that, Cui Dongshan, as the suzerain, officially invited Huang Ting of Taiping Mountain to serve as the chief guest for Qingping Jianzong. Pushun Yi Yunyun and Dequan Yao Xianji are famous guests. Inviting Qing Tong and Qiu Du to serve as the honorable mention of Qingping Sword sect, and Jian Xiu Chao Jun, who was unable to attend the meeting today, to serve as the last worship. The 3 are equivalent to serving as members of the Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. At this point, the guests' observance of the ceremony is over. After that, Qingping Jianzong's first meeting of the Patriarch's meeting will be held. Members include Qin Pingyan, Changming, Wei Wenlong, Pei Qian, Zhou Li, Xiaomo, Jiasheng. Cui Dongshan, Miyu, Cui Wei, Chongqiu Sui on the right, Chao Sunny. Tao Ran, Wu Go, Xiao Menying, Qiu Du. In addition, the 5 ancestors have seats for worship, Keqing, Qing Tong and Qiu Du. Huang Ting, Yi Yunyun, Yao Xianji. Qin Pinggan personally sent the audience out of the Patriarch Hall. Except for a few who stayed in the square, they all began to return to the mansions and courtyards of Xiefeng. Not in a hurry to return to the Patriarch Hall, Qin Pinggan came to Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui who were on the top of the mountain, and said with a smile, "I'm so negligent." Lu Jubao smiled and said jokingly, "You don't have to say hello to the hundreds of people you know and don't know. I'm an idler from start to finish. I would like to participate in such a relaxed and comfortable watching ceremony." Yu Panshui glanced at the fairy and said with a smile, "His Lord Hidden Officer, that wind kite fairy is not bad, right?" Qin Pinggan smiled and said, "One more one will be even better." Yu Panshui was impatient and complained, "Don't pick fat, just pick thin ones, there is no such business experience in the world." Cui Dongshan jumped up and hugged Yu Panshui's neck so that the latter had to bow his head and bow his waist. "Fatty you, who is fat if you are not fat?" Lu Jubao coughed slightly, and someone was finally willing to take his gaze back from somewhere, and hurriedly smiled and greeted the hermit. Qin Pinggan looked at Lu Yuzhou, nodded and smiled, "I miss Osmanthus Island for so many years, I miss it very much." Both sides were still teenagers. The Qingping Peak of Xindu Mountain towers into the clouds. Standing on the top of the mountain and looking into the distance, the sea of clouds is surging in the field of vision. On the white cloud in a blue shirt, Wanjing is in both eyes. In the Xuandu Temple, a fat man who seems to be able to breed fat every season. Hanging from his waist is a peach charm that was personally given by the master of the old temple, and he can ignore those that are enough to make an ascendant monk hit the wall. Mysteriously restrained, Yanzhua Pidian found Sun Daechang's dojo, which was a famous Vipassana, lightly knocked on the jumen of the main hall, and asked tentatively, "Old Guanzhu, are you in retreat? Are you busy?" An impatient voice came from the room, "If you have something to say, it's okay to get out of it." Yanzhua rubbed his hands outside the door and said, "When I came here, I knew someone from outside the world. He didn't wear robes or scarves. Instead he had hairpins and flowers. If the other person's character is in the palm of the hand, To be strong, maybe it is a huge business that never ceases to flow with a huge profit. Xianxia had just left the door. He called it a go out to practice, but it was actually a group of side branches and hilltops of the vassal of the Xuandu temple. Before, in the ancestral courtyard of Xuanduguan, Xianxia didn't feel anything. Anyway, he could see the master of the old man in the peach forest every 3 to 5. He moved 2 benches to sit in the stream and drank a little wine together. As for the difference of 7 or 8 generations between the two sides, Daochang's son does not pay attention to it, and Xianxia is not polite. Daochang's son does not take things seriously and acts and works. Those Haigong real people are even more polite to Xianxia. In addition, Xiandu Guan is a Taoist sword fairy. In the veins, the Taoist officials often carry swords or sabers, which naturally gave Xianxia an illusion. It seems that he is still in his hometown in the Great Wall of Jianghu. You don't need to care about your seniority, realm or anything. As a result, when Xianxia really left Xuandu Temple and went to the vast mountains and rivers outside, he learned that the Taoist priests from the ancestral court of Xuandu Temple were out of the house. They were very famous and those grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the world. The Lord, the true guardian of the country, spread branches and leaves all over Qizhou, and saw this young fat man. He didn't need Xianxia to give out the prepared rhetoric. He was very polite to this young fat man from the ancestral court. Polite. In fact, Xianxia misunderstood. Not all genealogical officials who came out of Xiandu Temple had this treatment. Those Dao sect immortals were actually really curious about what this fat man had to do with the old Guanzhou, so they all used it. With a playful look of, the old master shouldn't have found an illegitimate child to take home outside. He looked at the more face-to-face surnamed Yan Zhenxiu. After all, there are not many Taoist priests who dare to fight the Taolin idea. The old master has always adhered to a certain purpose. Since he has accepted disciples, the teacher does not teach it by himself. Should they be allowed to run outside and let outsiders teach the principles of life? Coupled with some unique and distinctive styles of the old view master. By the way, the entire Xuandu view is unique in the Qingming world, and it is possible to walk sideways outside the Baiyujing realm. As for Xianxia's true identity as the Xuantuguan of the ancestors of the various veins, he has not publicized it to the outside world, deliberately concealing it. If the old master doesn't mention this, who dares to leak the news? Therefore, even in today's Xuandu Temple, there are no more than 10 Taoists who know that Xianxia is from the Great Wall of Jianghu, together with the Taoist gatekeeper Han Zhanran with the Taoist name, Chunhui. Anyway, Xiandu Guan never lacks stories and talks. Sun Daochang sneered and said, "Is that the madman who likes to pretend to be auntie? I heard that this servant swayed all the way to the border of Qizhou before stopping. It was really a dog nose." This is not the case when the senior sister left the customs and immediately rushed over. However, the other party still understood some rules, and did not directly enter the realm of Xuandu View. After all, Xuandu Guan couldn't deal with the mountain where he was. This guy was probably worried about being covered in sack. As for the so-called business that Fatty Yen said, it was not to harm that peach forest. At first, Xianxia deceived a big fool's smile into solidification. After a moment of silence, Xianxia jumped and furiously said, "Could it be a liar? It's really a rebellion. I dare to swindle and abduct to the door of our Xuandu temple. I will call Sister Xuanhuan and ask him for justice." It turned out that the other party threatened that the peach stick pen, peach talisman, peach leaf bookmark and other items that Xianxia carefully manufactured could be sold to Yongzhou, which is not bordered by Qizhou, so that he could make a lot of money. As long as Yan Xingguan nodded, he could wait to collect the money in the future. In addition, Xuanduguan still has a basket of peaches every year. Anyway, every year the Taoists of Xuanduguan can't finish it. They don't charge money as gifts, so why waste it? There are so many Taoist halls. There are celebrations every day. When there are celebrations, you need a dustpan and a basket of xianxia vegetables and fruits. The Xuanduguan Xiantao, which is famous throughout the Qingming world, can worry about its sales? Xianxia felt that it was feasible. No matter how courage the other party was, no matter how high his backing was, he wouldn't dare to fool us into Xuantuguan's head, right? How did he register himself with you? This guy calls himself Qingling. He has a name but no surname. He doesn't have a Dao name or anything. He says that he has only been in trouble for a long time. There are many friends on the road and they are willing to sell him a bit of thin noodles. Hearing this, the veteran inside the house sneered. This is a gangster and there are many friends on the road. I asked him what his realm was and he honestly explained that he is a fairyland from the top mountain in Yongzhou, very prestigious in his sect, and I see him with 3 entourages around him. It seems that they are all land the god, probably because I'm afraid I won't believe it, this fellow Qingzero Taoist also actively asked to take an iron flute with him as a deposit, but I didn't dare to receive it. He reported a mailing address and it is estimated that at this time, still waiting for my news. Sun Daochang smiled and hesitated whether to inform the senior sister of this person's news. This place is actually the Patriarch Hall of Xuandu Temple, the root place of all the branches and leaves of the sword immortal family of Taoism in the world. There are as many as 40 or 50 portraits of Taoist ancestors hanging in the main hall. The Taoist temples of the xianxia sect and the descendants of the temple outside by Yujing, hanging statues depend on their respective backgrounds. In addition, some are Jindan Taoists. After death, the hanging statues can occupy a place in the Patriarch Hall and enjoy the incense, but for a behemoth like Shen Duguan, it needs to be a Yupu realm monk to start. It is only because he is a contemporary master who has a high level of Taoism and long enough to live long enough to occupy the pit without for too many years. Therefore, many of the patriarchs above the statues are actually lower in seniority than Sun Huaizhong. The hanging statues in the Patriarch's Hall are arranged in order from high to low according to their seniority, and they are like a pagoda in the end. On the upper part of the wall, there are 3 hanging statues which are blank and 2 are juxtaposed. They belong to the future master Sun Huaizhong and the senior sister Wang Sunday. It's like a kind of vacant position to wait. In the Qingming world it is not too strange. This is the reason that the old people don't hesitate to talk about life and death, and they will prepare the coffin for themselves early in life. The more blank hanging statues in the hall of the patriarchs of the immortal mansion on a mountain naturally means the more living patriarchs of this sect. The gate of the Patriarch Hall slowly opened. Sun Daochang crossed the threshold and walked out of the hall, squinting his beard. He is looking for a poor senior sister. Looking for business with you is just a bonus, and he is using you as a stepping stone. When opening the door, Fatty Yen lowered his head and did not look at the scene in the hall. When the door was closed, Yanzhua looked up again and asked a very pragmatic question. Lord, can you tell me the truth? I will tell him. Partnership, can you really make a lot of money? Daochang's son nodded and said, yes. Yanzhua was relieved when he heard the words, as long as it's not a liar, it's always a good thing to know a few more people of this kind, and to have a familiar face. Sun Daochang smiled and said, this Long Xinpu doesn't like to stay on the mountain and practice well. He likes to run into the rivers and lakes to stir the water. After a long time, those with shallow eye sockets are honored as Longshi, just with Lin Jiangxian. Compared with that Master Lin, the gold content is a bit far behind. Anyway, Long Xinpu has a thick skin. Even if there is someone who is not afraid of death, he is willing to call him Longzhang instruct, he dare to accept it. That old Taoist with the pseudonym Qingling, real name Long Xinpu, was an old ancestor of Bingjie Mountain in Yongzhou, and if calculated by seniority, he was still the grand ancestor of the contemporary mountain lord. Bingjie Mountain is one of the top hills in Yongzhou. As the only remaining old man of the same generation in Bingjie Mountain, he claims to have prestige in the martial art, and has a thin face outside. But here in Bingjie Mountain the atmosphere is rather strange. The monks are not very old. There is the saying that, 1,000 years of calamity, and it is not that the older you are, the more you can fight. Because the monks over there are not long enough, so this person's seniority actually took a big advantage. Otherwise it should be said that in the sects of Xuandu Temple and Keishishan, there is a great ancestor who is the master of the monk and the sect master. Don't scare people to death? After all, if you can live for 5,000 to 6,000 years, where can your realm be so low? This Long Xinpu of Bingjishan was from the same hometown as his senior sister, or the same year, and both came from a small place in Yongzhou. But when it comes to realm, cultivation aptitude and fighting ability, it's 1,000 miles worse than my senior sister. The boy dangled outside, not starving to death, nor being beaten to death, just relying on a mouth. The 3 falls in a row are all caused by the failure of the mouth. Yanzhua asked curiously, this senior is the senior sister who is rushing to watch the Lord? Is there any talk here? Daochang's son stared. Don't ask if you shouldn't. If your kid talks messily with a big mouth and doesn't care about anything like a junior with your sister's temper, then the senior sister will go back to clean up. It will be a poor way. Back then, when Dao was not old, it was nothing, but now he is the master of one view anyway. It is a little bit of face, and it's unreasonable to reach out with his hand and cover half of his face every day. Sun Daochang walked out of this forbidden area of Vipassana, and asked casually, how do you feel when you go out? Yanzhua sighed with emotion. The majestic and prestigious, I am popular wherever I go. It is very good and it is not in vain. Not as good as me. In fact, this is due to the recommendation of the young hermit. Otherwise, Fatty Yin, who is covered in bronze and smelly, in the well regulated by Yujing, on the road of making money, I am afraid that there are 18 kinds of martial arts, and there is not much room for display. The status of Lin Jiangxian's Yashan in the Ruzhou relied on the large number of people and the strong support of the Jianghu sect of the Qijin dynasty. Yashan's direct martial artist, of course, can walk sideways in the mountains and rivers of that continent. And Xiandu Guan is well deserved in this Qizhou. Unlike Yinzhou, the two Jingshan and Dachao sects have faced each other since ancient times, and their forces are the same. Of course, today is different. The two families have become a family, and they are still the kind of family literally. In the marriage of the sects on the mountain, most of the disciples looked at each other right and then tied the knot. How can two masters of the sect become a Taoist couple? This is indeed the first time in the Qingming world. There is also a harvesting mountain in Juzhou, which competes with the Qingci Palace, one of the ancestral courts of the Taoist Fulu. Even on the side of Yuzhou, there is a Shoshan Pavilion, which is able to match the Huayang Palace of the Earth Lung Mountain. It's hard to say who is the dominant family. In Yongzhou there are Xianzhang faction and Bingjishan, two top sect immortal palaces, always vying for the position of the leader of the state. Of course, Bai Yujing was the master of the entire Qingming world, even if it was Xuanhuan, there was still a huge gap with it. It can even be said that all the sects in the Qingming world are Bai Yujing's outer door vassals. Yanzhua asked, "Old Guanzhu, can I do business with him?" Sun Daochang hummed, "It's up to you, money comes and goes, it's just business, there is no taboo here." What's more, the old grudge between Xuandu Guan and Bingjishan from Sun Weishong's point of view, is not deadlocked. It is just that the contemporary mountain lord of Bingjishan has his brains, and he refuses to come out. Daochang Sun asked, "Do you really like making money so much?" Yanzhua smiled and said, "I like it when I was young. I like it when I was young. Besides practicing swordsmanship, I have to find something to do to help distract. Daochang Sun nodded, "It's pretty good. If there is a chance through this transaction the two parties can ease the relationship, and in the future I recommend Yanzhua to serve as the deacon of the accountant of the ancestral court of Xiandu Guan. Anyway, I also have a talk. In order to avoid being called nepotism, Xiandu Guan has no shortage of sweeping Taoists for the time being." Daochang Sun said, "You go call Di Yuanfeng and Zhan Qing and go out with Pin Dao for a relaxing time." Yanzhua nodded and agreed, and then he went to call the two lucky guys with deep blessings. Yanzhua asked tentatively, "Should I fly the sword to send a letter to the old Bingjishan?" Daochang Sun shook his head and said, "No. Last time, Sun Daochang traveled far away from the aperture, and once again traveled through the vast world. Finally, he collected two direct disciples from Luzhou and Beiju, and they were included in the universe in the sleeves together, and brought back the Xuandu temple. It was just a personal pass in name, and a few Dao books and a few fairy tactics were lost to them. In fact, it was the upper 5-level Daoists like concierge Han Zhanran who really taught swordsmanship and Dao tactics for the double. According to Sun Daochang, he should be preaching to others, "Master, poor Dao has a shortcoming. You can teach genius but you can't teach stupid people." How dare those two young people from outside of Luzhou, North Guizhou, have any complaints? I only feel that being able to have a relationship with a thunderous fifth person in the world, even if it is only in the name of a teacher and apprentice, is already a great blessing for the ancestral grave, and I dare not expect more. Moreover, as long as it is a Taoist priest of Xuandu Guan's ancestral veins, he can practice with peace of mind. At least no one has to worry about being bullied outside. In the arms of the old master grandson, it is like a towering ancient tree, sheltering all the Taoist priests from the wind and rain. Yanzhua went to find Di Yuanfeng and Zhan Qing, and said that your master had made a decree, asking us to accompany his old man to go out and relax. People are more popular than others. These two people of the same age as the direct descendants of the old Buddhist masters, have a lawless seniority in the Xuandu temple, and they have made an exception to practice in Taolin Jiamao. To Di Yuanfeng, when they saw this fatty yen, they didn't dare to have any underestimating thoughts. Without saying anything, they immediately followed Yanzhua to see master. In their hometown of Luzhou, Beiju, at a site of an immortal mansion, Di Yuanfeng and Zhan Qing had personally learned how to act in a non-human style. It's no wonder that you can be called fellow Qin Shaodao by your own master. Only when they later learned that the other party turned out to be the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, they began to rejoice for their rest of life, and the blessings in disguise, and cherished the now stable years of cultivation. Yanzhua smiled and said, "In the future Qin Pingan came to Xiandu Guan. The three of you are really old friends reunited and you still have to have a good drink? Do you have any ideas about this drink? I can help you prepare a few celestial immortals early. Home wine, the price, it's easy to say, the original price is guaranteed. Di Yuanfeng didn't speak up. Zhan Qing smiled and said, if you dare to love it, brother Lao Yen will bother too much. In fact, the first meeting with Di Yuanfeng and the others was also the first time Qin Pingan took the courage after he strayed into the blessed lotus root and took the initiative to learn from the monk on the mountain to enter the mysterious land of mountains and rivers, seek ways to visit immortals, and pursue opportunities. If you only look at the results, Qin Pingan has certainly gained a lot, but the danger of the process is indeed a lingering fear. In addition to this, Qin Pingan was tantamount to invisibly taking on a cause and effect of considerable weight. In the small Taoist temple on the top of the mountain, there is a middle-aged Taoist peachwood statue enshrined. This person's true identity is the younger brother of Taoist master son of Xuandu Temple. Personally asked Dao and Jian Shendu Guan, the person who died under the truly invincible sword was the Shendu Guan Taoist official. And this person's direct disciple Song Malu is a Taoist who is known as Blue is better than blue. According to the truth of Huolong on Tianfushui Island in Longgong Shaodong, this Taoist priest, who belonged to the master-nephew of Laoguan, once used Yongzhou as his base camp and gathered nearly 60% of the Taoist Dharma veins outside of Baiyujing. This statement, of course, will have a certain amount of moisture. Because the small group of sects and immortals, the world's top sects, did not really form an alliance with Song Malu back then. There may be a contract in private, but at least on the face of it, there is no alliance with Yongzhou, but even so, it is enough to shock the world, just like the real person of the fire dragon used a metaphor at the time. Can contend with half of Confucianism and compete with the Chinese Confucian Temple. Ansong Malus Master Sun Daichengs Jr., the peachwood statue of this old Taoist priest in the ascending realm, is now the key to the wooden house, one of Qin Ping's 5 elements natal creatures. Except for Di Yuanfeng and Zhan Qing, who were received by the old masters in their sleeves, it was like a rooster and dog ascending to heaven, turning into a rainbow and flying into the sky. In fact, she almost became the old master of the Willows and Kaik Mansion. His personal disciple. Yanzhuo was curious and said, when will our brothers have a little wine? Tell me how they met Qin Pingan during the trip back then. Because of Qin Pingan, Yanzhuo is very close to them. As for what these two people think, Fatty Yen doesn't care. Zhan Qing agreed with a smile, saying that of course it was okay, but Di Yuanfeng felt helpless. He really didn't want to mention the old, cunning, money-making good man. Di Yuanfeng, who fell in his family back then, wore an ancestral sword on his waist. He once enshrined him with a family from a frontier military commander and learned some swordsmanship. He once used the identity of Qin Jiyuan of Jiao country. Of course, it was the latter who planted the blame and spilled dirty water. Along the way, I met Sun Daochang, Huang Shi and others, and several unwelcome Shanzi Yeshio, worked together to seek for money, and walked through the secret realm of Shinfu. Di Yuanfeng tied his head to the waistband of his trousers. I'm desperate to be rich and rich. On the other hand, Zhan Qing, as the young master of Baiting Elementary School, is a well-known romantic and thin lover. At the beginning he used bamboo sticks and mango shoes, a mutton jade flute around his waist, and a pair of noble sons carrying the hidden root. The bamboo stick of a soft sword, accompanied by a beautiful woman, is simply a trip to the mountains and rivers. As for the old masters, why are they willing to accept them as disciples and bring them back to the Qingming world? Zhan Qing and Di Yuanfeng are still at a loss. The old real people of the upper 5 realms called uncle and uncle, and even were respectfully called that great uncle and uncle. It's just that the relationship between the two people in the same family is actually normal now. After all, the two sides have never been the same. Different ways, of course, they just think so. Zhan Qing asked cautiously, Brother Yen, the hermit, as a foreigner, how did he get a foothold on the Great Wall of Jianghu in the first place? Yanzhuo thought about it seriously, then laughed and said, treat people with sincerity. When Fatty Yen went to call someone, Dao Chang's son found his senior sister Wang's son, and asked tentatively, the Long Xinpu in Bingjishan has come to the door, do you want to see him? The girl's graceful female crown said with a calm expression, if the other party is under the guise of retelling the old from the same country, it will be avoided. No. If you think that he is here to discuss things with our Xuandu, and it is more important, anyway you are the one to watch. Lord, it doesn't matter to me. Dao Chang's son asked, if the other party has both, what is good? Wang's son said, of course it's official business rather than private business. It's okay to meet each other. Sun Daochang was relieved, was silent for a moment and said with no reason, "Senior sister, our master, is a person who has a good night." As the master of Sun Daochang and senior sister Wang Sun, the old Taoist priest with the Taoist name Qingyuan, is dead, and is dead without disease. A few apprentices are all considered promising. If they leave a few hundred years later they may be worried. Wang Sun nodded and said, "Fortunately master can walk away, otherwise we will live a few more years, and we will be mad at death by the few of us." Even when it comes to master, Wang Sun still has no taboo when talking. Sun Daochang smiled and said, "One by one, you were not willing to take over the position of master. I have always suspected that master chose me back then. Did master sister talk to master secretly? If there is no evidence, stop talking nonsense." Sitting under the peach tree, Wang Sun stretched out his hand to hold a long sword in its sheath and taught, "The junior is not big or small." Sun Daochang laughed blankly. At that time, there were as many as 7 children who were appointed as the master of the Buddhist temple by Xuandu Guan, the leader of the Qingyuan Taoist, and were led by the old true man into the Buddhist temple at the same time. There were only 7 children, and as a result only ascended cultivators were among them, and then there were 3. In addition to the grandson who had just left the customs, the current master Sun Huaizhong, and the younger brother of both parties who liked to hold a mountain stick and carry a scorpion, come from a small place rich in loquats, born in poverty, named Huanggan and later said, "Oh, Green Li." The 3 fellow students, Sun Huaizhong, senior sister Wang Sun and junior brother Huanggan, all entered the Ascension realm one after another, and they also served as the abbots of Xuandu Temple. Therefore, the year when he took office as the master and finally accepted his disciples was also regarded by later generations as a big year, in the history of Xuantuguan, the most abundant year. Even if it is placed in the heavy old almanac pages in the entire Qingming world, it is destined to be a rich stroke. Therefore, the old scholar took a child with a tiger head hat last time as a guest Xuandu Temple, so he made a special trip to this patriarch's hall to respect 3 sticks of incense to the former master. Both the people on the hanging statues and the pilgrims outside the hanging statues are good at accepting disciples. In addition, the closed disciples of the old scholars and the younger disciples who took up the post of the master also have a great relationship. This is very good. The master of Xuandu Temple, Xuanhuan, was named Qingyuan. The first time an old Taoist officially preached to the disciples who entered the room, he threw a book of Taoist ancestors with only 5,000 words to the children. And Wang Sun just read the opening 6 words of, "Tao can be Tao is very Tao," and she closed the book. That year he was only an old Taoist priest who served as one of the 3 capitals in Shendu Temple, and he nodded and smiled. "Let her play." The little girl who was still wearing 2 croissants at that time jumped out of the house and went to play alone. Only Sun Huaizhong and his fellow brothers were left, all with big eyes and small eyes, and they were shocked by the heavens. Sun Huaizhong asked the senior sister afterwards what was going on. At that time, the sister's explanation was that I didn't know how to read, so the master threw a book to me. Sun Huaizhong really believed him, young and ignorant, young and ignorant. Indeed, her hometown is the elder sister Wang Sun from Yongzhou. Her family has been snake catchers for generations, and it is not surprising that she has never read to read. On the other hand, Sun Huaizhong, most of them with good backgrounds in practice, don't even talk about literacy, but they have memorized a lot of Taoism in various veins. The whole Taoist is hidden. It was many years before Sun Huaizhong knew the truth. It turned out that the senior sister just thought that the younger brother little grandson, who had just met for a short time no matter how young, was a cultivator. She could ask such idiot questions. It looks pitiful. She just found a lame excuse to comfort him. Anyway, in those years, every time the senior sister saw Sun Huaizhong, her eyes were extremely kind, and she never kept her face cold. Mostly, she was treated like a poor little fool who needed her. Since then, Wang Sun's path of cultivation has been extremely smooth, and the situation has broken like a bamboo. It's completely crushing his peers. Ichi Juechen can only look at the ascending back of that king and grandson from a distance. Over time, all Taoist priests of the Hui character generation in Shenduguan recognize their fate. There is no way to compare, so don't compare with Wang Sunday. Discuss Taoism, discuss justice, and no one will look for that grandson. Wang Sun first crushed his peers, then caught up with the teachers, and then the 2 generations on the top of the emblem. Among them there are many amazing cultivating geniuses, but they are all surpassed by Wang Sun one by one. It is no joke to say that later generations commented on Wang Sun's general corner. As a younger brother Huanggan, who is second only to Wang Sun in cultivation, the saying "be a god" before entering the Xiandu temple was the one with the slowest cultivation. As for Sun Huaizhong, during those carefree years of cultivating, he thought that he was not good enough to be good, and he was not so outstanding. Since there are senior sister Wang Sun genius and not genius, it is meaningless. As for later, he was said to be it's a late bloomer and it's accumulating and it sounds like a curse. On Xuanduguan's ancestral court, after the generation of Taoist priests with the emblems of the emblem grew up, Xuanduguan, as the leader of the world's Taoist sword and immortal family, is actually a famous mountain in Qizhou. Mountain, a secluded monastery, does not stain the world, and has very little contact with the outside world. When the Taoist officials of the Hui character generation began to grow into the backbone of the Xuandu temple, they occupied important positions in the Taoist temple. Often there are fellow students who have suffered a loss. Wang Sun waved his big hand, and it was the dozens of monks of the same age who secretly traveled far away with his teachers behind his back. Sun Huaizhong took the lead every time. The younger brother Huang Gan was the strategist, and the senior sister Wang Sun Cici responsible for dealing with those with high levels and letting her clean up the mess. For example, after returning to the Taoist temple, she talked with the elders of the teachers and elders. After the training, she had to think about it. Being confined to Taolin together, this is called the same difficulty. After Sun Huaizhong emerged from the Hui character generation and unexpectedly became the abbot of Xuandu Guan, for thousands of years, under Sun Guanz's acquiescence and even secretly adding to the flames, the Taoist priests of Xuandu Guanjian's lineage were the favorite and the best at them. The style of single challenge has even been carried forward to its apex. The dozens of exquisite sword formations in Xuandu Guan are magnificent. How did they come? Of course they came from a field fight. And from the young grandson, the young master, and then the old master, those stinky problems have to be put in a more fair way. They are some good traditions that are well known to passers-by. Come to draw a gourd with Sister Wang Suani. For example, hit someone as early as possible. Qingping Jianzong, the first meeting of the Patriarch Hall. There is a coffee table next to the chair, and a bowl of tea and a plate of melon seeds are placed on it. It seems that it will become a certain kind of rule in the discussion of the Patriarch Hall in the future. Chao Qingqing and Pei Qian are responsible for carrying the pot and pouring tea, and the millet grains are responsible for dividing the seeds. The little girl in black has a very serious look. How can it be? The total number of seeds in each plate, she has to ensure that the accuracy of a single seed is not bad. I stayed with Pei Qian last night to stay alive. She practiced for a long time, but she still felt that it was not safe enough. At most, the error was within 2 or 3 melon seeds. Anxious, Pei Qian helped her think of a seamless way and she took it out. When there is an error in the melon seeds, Pei Qian's eyes indicate the millet grains, the signal is 2 to 2, and a reminder that one is missing. Aha, perfect. Chen Pingan took the lead in knocking on the melon seeds, and the good person mountain master quickly saw the way. Very good, there are 3 more than the others, and sure enough, the millet grains are still very towards him. Jia Xing sat in the most righteous position. The old gods thought that the first meeting of the Patriarch's Hall for the establishment of the sect was not his own. He never thought that Qin Shanju was still so obsessed, and Cui was still so respectful. Qiu Du is not much better than old immortal Jia. In fact, besides Jia Sheng and the old woman, Yao Xinji is the most awkward one. He half-joked with Mr. Qin to ask for the status of the next guest. He didn't take it too seriously. He never wanted to be a famous guest. There is a fixed seat in King Pingfeng Patriarch Hall. As for Tao Jianxian, of course he didn't doze off. Everyone is more casual, it's not like just pretend to chat with the family behind closed doors, it's just that. Qin Pingan picked up the tea bowl, paused for a moment as if he had felt it and smiled and said, I must admit that we have a very righteous atmosphere and everyone has credit. Slightly cold, Qin Pingan originally planned to put down a sentence. Since everyone in the room didn't speak, it was acquiescence, very good, and began to discuss matters. Fortunately, the old fairy Jia had a sincere expression on his face and took the lead to break the silence and said in a deep voice, it's a must. So Cui Dongshan, Pei Qian, and Chao Sunny all stared at the old fairy Jia. Qin Pingan stood up suddenly. At the gate of King Pingfeng Mountain, out of thin air, there was a woman in a red cotton-padded jacket with flying brows, with a wine gourd hanging on her waist, holding a horse in one hand and beckoning and shouting, Little Master! Sword of Coming Chapter 959. Wearing a green shirt, it instantly swept out of the Zushitang, like a green waterfall, flowing from the top of Qingping Peak to the gate of the mountain. Cui Dongshan licked melon seeds and smiled. the discussion is put on hold. Let's just drink tea for a while. Pei Qian originally wanted to follow the master to meet Li Baoping at the gate of the mountain, but the big white goose smiled and shook her head at her. Qiu Du, Tao Ran, the members of the Patriarch's Hall who had just gone up the mountain for a short time, and Yi Yunyun and other guest officials would naturally feel strange. I don't know where it is sacred. It is worthy of Qin Shan's his invigorating and moving people. It seems that great things can be temporarily put aside. I went straight to the foot of the mountain without saying a word, and even the effort of talking in the ancestor hall was not willing to waste. This was not like Qin Pinggan's usual style. Suddenly Cui Dongshan's eyes lit up. Master Sister, I know the greatest contributor to the origin of our downfall mountain style. Pei Qian stared. Don't get involved with Sister Aquarius. The younger generation of Luopishan are either afraid of Cui Dongshan or Pei Qian. However, children like Bai Xian who entered the Luopa mountain very late may not be very clear. Whether it is Big White Goose or Pei Qian, it will be different on someone's side. Cui Dongshan was once stamped on his head by that person holding his seal. When he was a child, he was able to deceive a few old catchers of the money, and he was also willing to be that person's little attendant, often copying books together. As for Li Huai, when I was studying in a small town and rural school, my rompers were thrown into a tree, crying with tears and snot. The key is not to remember that person's hatred. At the gate of the mountain, Qin Pinggan fell to the ground with a bright smile. Li Baoping grinned and said, Little Master, Happy New Year. A woman in a red cotton-padded jacket, holding a green bamboo stick, wearing a narrow knife auspicious charm, and a white wine gourd hanging from her waist. She is slender and she is a big girl. Qin Pinggan glanced at the sword-raising gourd and Li Baoping said with a face, Uncle Master, I don't drink often and occasionally I'm tired of reading, refresh my mind, move to rescue soldiers with the wine bug, go to fight with the sleepy bugs, win. Lose more and less. Qin Pinggan laughed softly. What's this? Little Shirshu is almost a drunkard. Let's go, Xiao Shirshu will take you up the mountain for a walk. Today is just a sect celebration. Let's go to the ancestral hall for a while. If you have something to talk about, you should make up for the ceremony. The mountain under our feet is called Shindu Mountain, and the two next to it are Yunjing Mountain and Sumyao Mountain, both named by your brother Cui. Li Baoping nodded vigorously and then she pointed to the Zongmen plaque. Qingping Jianzong, the name is especially good, the wind is born on the ground and it starts at the end of Qingping. It is the blue that is better than the blue and it is also a leaf. Duckweed returns to the sea. Where can we not meet in life? It has a lot of meaning and beauty. It is really difficult for Brother Cui to think of such a good name. It is estimated that he had a chance to come up with such a good name. Qin Pinggan smiled and said, the name of the sect was taken by the little uncle himself. Li Baoping's beautiful and smart eyes narrowed into crescent moons, and sighed deliberately, oh, nothing unexpected. Qin Pinggan was about to reach out to help lead the horse. Li Baoping quickly shook his head and said, it doesn't need to go up the mountain, it's better to stay at the foot of the mountain. Today is the sect celebration of the little uncle. I also have to trouble little master to find a broom and dustpan. Qin Pinggan couldn't help but said, what a big deal. Li Baoping picked up the green bamboo stick and waved his big hand, be stubborn. Horseshoes were in a row, looking at the direction they went to Luobaetan to drink water. Inside the Patriarch Hall, Cui Dongshan kept his head tilted and listened. Hearing this he smiled at Pei Qian. What do you say? Not convinced? Qin Pinggan took Li Baoping and walked slowly on the mountain road, and the two climbed up the stairs. When the woman in the red cotton-padded jacket suddenly appeared, the Yu Panshui on the top of Qingping Peak was taken aback. This is not a shrunken mountain river in the ordinary sense. Coming from the continent? I'm shallow and it's hard to watch the excitement. Brother Jubao, your realm is high so you can weigh it up? Lu Jubao's performance was a bit weird. He just looked at the scene of Wu Chao Peak at Yunjing Mountain, turning a blind eye to the woman leading the horse at the foot of the mountain, and turning a deaf ear to friends' inquiries. Yu Panshui muttered to himself, is it really a cross-continental journey this can bring a horse? The legendary house soaring does not have this vision of heaven and earth, it can actually be able to hold the Middle-earth god continent. The luck of the mountains, rivers, and temperament is strange. Why do I still look at the Dao Qi of Suishan in the Middle-earth? Today, who can food from the tiger's mouth on the side of the mountain monarch's travels, I can hear my ears. Zhou Shanjun, who is named Da Jiao, has a bad temper. There are only a handful of the gods of mountains and rivers in the world who can possess the title of god. According to the latest regulations of the Confucian Temple, for the time being, only the 5 sacred mountains of the Middle Earth and the King of the Four Seas have this honor. Lu Yuzhou said in his heart. It seems to be Li Baoping from Xianxia Academy. I heard that she and Zhulin Shui from the Chidu Temple in Beipingzu, as well as the wise Li Huai, are both direct disciples of Mr. Qi. Li Baoping seems to be she liked to wear red clothes when she was a child. Apart from studying, she likes to travel alone. Not long ago, she passed the examination at the School of Rites and was already a Confucian gentleman. Li Baoping had a relationship with Yuanyu of Hengku Academy. During a debate, my friend on the mountain and I borrowed the beautiful rubbings, but I didn't understand what they were arguing about. According to seniority, Master Hermit could indeed be regarded as her little uncle. Since Li Baoping is Master Wenxing disciple of the second pass, Master Wenxing has been in a good relationship with Sui Shan. Can't it be Zhou Shanjun who sent her here personally? Yu Panshui suddenly said, it turned out to be her, that's how it is, no wonder it's no wonder. Lu Jubao still didn't take the bait. Traveling around can indeed send people to other continents, but the noise made will definitely not be so small. If it is really the magical method on the Sui Shan side, according to the earliest definition of the magic technique by Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, then contact Li Baoping's current cultivation level. If you want to cross continents, you need to use several ancient magical powers in one breath, move mountains and scenery, set yourself up on fire to calm your soul, and use wind and water. When Li Baoping's feet landed, the entire Xindu mountain boundary would be shaken, and the price Sui Shan paid was destined to be not small. It would definitely consume a part of Sui Shan Dao Qi, but with his traveling style, this famous man moved the world. Divine Sovereign is recognized as selfless, and no matter how good the relationship with Wenxing is, he will not be so fake for his own sake. Obviously there is another expert, and only talking about the opponent's hand, it can be regarded as the 14th realm cultivation base. So this is why Lu Jubao deliberately pretended that he hadn't seen anything. There were only a few monks in the 14 realms in the world. On Tongyi's Hao, there was a cave master of Luobeatan Bixiao from the Taoist temple of the East China Sea earlier. I have gone to the Qingming world to open up a dojo. Because the Old View Master's own harmony is located, the Old View Master will be forced to share the time, place and harmony in the wild world, the less the world will be. Taiping, this will make the old Guanzhou's cultivation base drop again and again. In case Aquarius can't keep it, maybe it will be difficult for the old Guanzhou to get out of it. Dominate your head. A monk with the nickname Chicken Soup Monk, Xinqing also went to the Western Buddhist countries. It is very likely that he quietly launched the fourth session of the road. The old blind man stayed in the 100,000 mountains without moving his nest, and Bai was also in Xuandu Temple. As for the dragon slasher who returned to the 14th realm, he was always lonely and wild. Then it is very likely that there is already an invisible monk of the 14th realm in the vast world, or a brand new 14th realm will soon be added. Some things must be pretended not to be known. Yupanshui's realm is not high but Yupu realm, but there is vision. It is impossible to know this. Moreover, the origin of the change in the Liju cave at the time, based on the relationship between Yupanshui and Xiuhu, cannot be it's a complete outsider. Yupanshui glanced at the god of wealth of Aizhou Lu who was a dull gourd and tweeted, as expected, Brother Jubao, he is a good man, no wonder I earn more money than me, so much more. Fatty Yu has always been curious, is it possible for the Brother Jubao around him to make money such as earning half of the god's money in Howren? But it's not right. Lu Jubao's ability to make money is indeed the best in the world, but spending money is not an ordinary lavish, but Lu Jubao is trying to spend money in exchange for the merits of the Confucian Temple Merit Book, which is not very similar. In fact, Yu Panshui has always felt that he can't see through the person around him. The longer he gets along with Lu Jubao, he will always feel uncomfortable looking at flowers in the fog. Thoroughly, it's just that the two of them have too good brains and their chess skills are too high, but in the final analysis, some contexts are still relatively clear. For example, Cui Yang can do the rebellious deceit and destroy the ancestor in the eyes of the world, and he can betray the Wenxing line. But Cui Yang will never give up his identity as a scholar in his mind. Zheng Juzhong, even with the identity of the world's first giant of the magic road, his thoughts are extremely high and profound, but in the bones of Zheng Juzhong, it will still give Yu Panshui a pure and mellow feeling. Of course, it may be an illusion that Zheng Juzhong deliberately made him feel Yu Panshui. As for Lu Jubao, it is not true. On the contrary, it makes Yu Panshui the most puzzled. He is not sure what Lu Jubao wants to do. It seems that some of the biggest truths have been concealed by Lu Jubao's facts of making money. Lu Jubao smiled indifferently, it will take a long time to see people's hearts. When the world is really peaceful, you will know the use of my money. Be careful in earning money and spend generously. No matter how much money you have, you always enter and exit from the front door. To earn money, don't delay in accumulating virtue. Otherwise, the more nights go and the more you can accumulate, the easier things will happen, and it will bring harm to children and grandchildren. It is hard to earn money in the world, and it is even harder to accumulate zuinfu. Yu Panshui said with emotion, "There are more people who can make money, and there are very few people who really know how to spend money. When you are poor and white, you can earn some money to make a fortune. There is nothing wrong with it. When you have money, you have to earn money. Otherwise, morality is not worthy. Sitting on the golden mountain and silver mountain, the fortune and the misfortune will only be converted overnight, and the money will be collected by the predecessors and the future generations. Probably just like Cui Yang said back then. The big money is brought in the previous life and the book is for the next life." Lu Jubao looked at the two people who had already started climbing and said, "Let's go and take a look at Zhan Xianfeng." On the mountain road, Li Baoping said, "Uncle Master, don't let the Patriarch Hall wait for a long time. Talking about things is important." Qin Pingan smiled and nodded. Li Baoping then climbed the mountain and walked like flying. Qin Pingan followed him unhurriedly. When I arrived at Qingping Peak's Master Hall, Xiaomi Li had already prepared a chair early. Following Cui Dongshan's suggestion, he moved the chair to the position between Hao Ren Shanzhu and Pei Qian. If the rules are not the rules, the etiquette and other things will go aside first. Li Baoping first bowed with everyone. Self-registration number, Li Baoping, a disciple of Xianxia Academy. She glanced at the position of her chair and shook her head towards the little uncle. Qin Pingan moved the chair back, but not alone in the back row. In this way, Li Baoping was regarded as a courtesy and also a family member. Pei Qian smiled and called Sister Aquarius to help pour a bowl of tea. Mi Li touched his sweat on his forehead, and took the courage to put a pile of melon seeds like a small hill for the legendary lord from the cotton shoulder bag. He whispered, "My lord, Sister Aquarius, my name is Zhou Mi Li. The right guardian of Qilong Alley is now the deputy rudder of Qilong Alley under Longquan County's general rudder." Pei Qian wanted to dig a hole in the ground. Li Baoping was stunned, but she quickly smiled and said, "Make more efforts." If it hadn't been mentioned by the little black girl today, Li Baoping would have forgotten the token of the leader of the rudder who had been given to Pei Qian a long time ago. When Qin Pingan took his seat, the Zhu Shirtang continued to discuss matters. The first thing is that Cui Dongshan set rules for Qingping Jianzong. In the future, the Zhu Shitang will accept newcomers. In the future, the threshold for every seat in Qingping Feng Zhu Shitang will not be low. The monk must be the nascent soul, the sword repair must be the golden core, and the wufu must be the far travel realm. And it's not that after this line, you can definitely have a seat, you also have to look at the records on the merit book. The second thing is the arrangement of the respective dojo. The chief enshrines Miyu, the direct disciple Higu, who lives with the flying sword Feilai Peak, and the Taoist temple is built on the Yunshang Peak of Xindu Mountain. Zhanglu Tsuwei, disciple Yu Xianhui, whose real name is Feijian Pozi Ling. The dojo is built on the Qinbian Peak of Xindu Mountain with cacti. On the right of Sui, the disciple Qing Chaolu. The dojo is at the Banxian Peak of the secondary peak of Xindu Mountain, sweeping the flower platform. Tao Ran is a sword repairer in the Golden Core realm, and the dojo is at the Vermilion Peak of Xindu Mountain. The four members of the Patriarch Hall happened to be Jianxiu, so the dojo was all serving as the Xindu Mountain of Qingping Sword Sect Ancestor Mountain. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Tao Jianxian, no one will hold the opening ceremony for the time being. When you enter the nascent soul realm in the future, let's make up for Tao Jianxian and do a big deal." Tao Ran nodded silently without objection. As for the nascent soul realm, dreaming is just fine. It is best if there is no special Jindan Peak opening ceremony so that you don't have to be ashamed of Xindu Mountain. Cui Dongshan shook his sleeves and clouds rose on the ground of the Zushitang, and a picture of the landscape situation appeared. It was the two auxiliary mountains of the Yunjing Mountain and the Chongmiao Mountain. There are different vermilion characters floating above the peaks, marking the names of the peaks. Cui Dongshan said, "Master, apart from keeping the Mixifeng Mansion on Xindu Mountain, I suggest that you move to Yunjing Mountain as the place where you really handle affairs. And this Yunjing Mountain I will serve as the first mountain. The Lord, the main peak of Chaofeng, is also my Taoist place. Don't think it's a cultivator. If you are a cultivator, you should receive a few disciples. In addition, there is still one thing that needs to be done. The troubled master is distracted, because I plan to start construction in the near future to set up a private academy in Mt. Chumiao and invite master to be the first head of the academy. Zhongqiu smiled and said, "It's all okay." Cui Dongshan asked, "Master Sister, are you planning to open the peak alone on Xindu Mountain or Yunzong Mountain?" Pei Qian said without hesitation, "It's in Yunjing Mountain." She glanced at the map and continued, "I will build a hut near the fishing pavilion in Qingzujian." Chen Pingan said suddenly, "Yunjingshan, the Mingtin peak over there, please allocate it to me." Pei Qian pursed his mouth tightly. In a sense, both the master and the apprentice had learned boxing with the same person. And the old man who stayed on the second floor of the bamboo building all the year round had a punch called Yunjiang Day style. So whether it was Pei Qian choosing the Yunzhengshan fishing pavilion or Chen Pingan's initiative to ask to occupy the Mingtin peak, it was a kind of tacit understanding between the master and the disciple. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Chao Qingqing came to serve as the first peak owner of Mount Sumyo Mountain Star, Jindan State, to open the peak according to the routine. It is not a bad rule. As for the first mountain owner of Sumyo Mountain, it is temporarily suspended. Wu Go Xiaomenying, your dojo is located next to the ladder road of Mt Myo. You can call Fulu Lisher by yourself for the construction of a mansion later. A fellow Taoist, the dojo is in Yurinping on Mt Sumyao. The height of this peak is second only to Wuxiao Peak. The scenery is still quite good, how about it?" Qing Tong nodded with a smile, clasped his fists and said, "Thanks to Sect Master Cui in advance. As a guest, even a chief guest like Huang Ting as usual, cannot open the peak alone and have no mountain tops to occupy. At most, there is a mansion in the mountain, but a fairy mansion or a sect dedicated to the name is not the case. Except for Yurinping and Qing Tong, Lao Chiu Chiudu was arranged by Cui Dongshan on Pasua Peak of Sumyo Mountain, which is also the water source of Sumyo Mountain. Obviously, Cui Dongshan's vision is to practice swordsmanship at the peaks of the ancestral mountain, Pure Takeo in Yunzongshan. Chi trainers other than Jian Xiu cultivated the Taoism in Mt. The old woman bit her scalp and said, "Qin Shanju, Hu Chuling and I are not strictly masters and apprentices. Can she apprentice with you to learn art?" For this old Dragon Palace teacher, her cultivation achievements are far inferior to the smooth practice of jealousy. There is a good master who is honest and good and a great backer. The reason why Chiu-Du was so nervous, of course, involves the generation that the monks on the mountain often value most. If the vinegar and vinegar can really become Qin Ping's direct disciple, it is equivalent to the same generation as Cui Dongshan. This is not what it is to climb the sky. Therefore, Chiu-Du even made a plan similar to working for Xindu Mountain. As long as Qin Pingan didn't say anything to death, the old woman would immediately speak up and submit a contract similar to life and death, and this kind of thing is absolutely not a child's play. Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "I will retreat as soon as I come. After I leave the customs I will go out for a long trip. Wu Chuling and I have been apprentices. For a long time I may not even be able to see me, so naturally I will teach more. Nothing about her. Besides, the only things I can tell are swordsmanship and martial arts, which are not suitable for Hu Chuling. If you want to talk about Fulu, I barely understand the way, but if Hu Chuling really wants to learn and can learn, I can be here." Regarding the guarantee with Chiu, in the future as long as I am with Qingping Jianzong, Hu Chuling wants to ask Fulu about it. Just ask me and he will give it all. In fact, there is no need to go near and farther about Hu Chuling's apprenticeship. Cui Dongshan immediately smiled and said, "If Chiu Gongfeng doesn't dislike it, I can be Hu Chuling as the preacher of the Qingping Feng Patriarch's Hall." Qin Pingan explained with a smile, "Cui Dongshan is a fairyland, and with the exception of martial arts, it is the only shortcoming of our sect Master Cui. In addition, almost every aspect is better than my husband. Hu Chuling and him learned from the teacher. Maybe in addition to a lower seniority in the mountains, in fact, compared to becoming my disciple following Cui Dongshan's cultivation, in the long run Hu Chuling will have more benefits and greater gains. Although Chiu-Du has little regrets, it is a great thing that Vinegar and Vinegar can become a direct disciple of Cui Dongshan. It is nothing more than changing from the best to the second best, and the old woman is extremely content. Especially when Qin Pingan personally said that Cui Dongshan was a fairyland, Chiu-Du was even more impressed. A mountain top, a hidden dragon and a tiger, the background is bottomless, but so. Besides, Qin Pingan promised himself that he was willing to work with Hu Chuling to teach Fulu. Chiu-Du did not dare to make an inch. What's more, the young hermit looked gentle, but he spoke directly. For example, he would appeal to the generation issue. So the old woman, who thought she was guilty of ignorance, immediately stood up and thanked Qin Shanju and Cui sect master respectively. After taking the seat, the old woman hesitated for a moment, full of guilt, and said frankly, The old man has been in the countryside for a long time, selfish seriously, this little abacus has made everyone read the jokes. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Mother Chiu, don't say that. You made a good start for our discussion of the Qingping sword sect patriarch hall. Chiu Du was confused when he heard it and made a good start. What does it mean? It's just that everyone seems to think that the young hermit's words are taken for granted. Old immortal Jia immediately followed. He is calm and speaks his own words. Chiu Gongfeng dares to openly say that he is selfish, and the poor Dao feels that selfishness is not important. The millet grains with two faint eyebrows kept frowning. After explaining this to the old fairy Jia, it really came to an understanding, clapping and applauding. Because of the topic that the old woman talked about, this happened to involve the third matter. Sect Master Cui himself was about to accept disciples. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, Hu Chuling and Jiang Chu, thank you. Cui Peanut, Xiaoluan will become my personal disciples recorded on the Qingping Peak Jinyu genealogy. As for who is the big disciple, don't worry, I will talk about it later. Qin Pingan wondered, Xiaoluan? Cui Peanut did not say that the girl was Cui Dongshan's long-lost sister, who turned to Qilong Alley by one hand. Even Cui Dongshan took thank you as a disciple. Qin Pingan didn't think there was anything. As for Jiang, he was the first in Luapa Mountain. A true monk Fulu, it is indeed a good thing that he can become the heir of Cui Dongshan, but Xiaoluan, this makes Qin Pingan angry. Qingping Jianzong as the next sect of Luapashan, Yu Cui Dongshan carry is digging the foot of the wall with a small endless. Because in the last celebration of the Laupa Mountain sect, in addition to Zhao Shu's next move to become the descendant of the mountain lord Qin Pingan, Xiaoluan, although not a direct disciple of Qin Pingan, is already a genealogical monk of the Laupa Mountain Jisa Peak. In addition, Xiaoluan now has an anonymous master. It is the white-haired boy in Qilong Alley. He was in the Great Wall of Jianqi prison under the alias of Frostfall. The latter is now on the side of Katupu. Every day he calls himself the only handyman disciple in Luapa Mountain. It seems that he is not ashamed but also quite complacent. It is just a matter of the world. It is really a coincidence. Qin Pingan clearly remembers that he was in jail. The grass is not arrogant, it has made a mountain mistake. Little grass out of the mountain Chao-Tu shop? It is not uncommon for a gash trainer to have two or even several preachers in the mountains. It's just that the record of the Zushitang's golden and jade genealogy relates to the attribution of the Taoist lineage, and of course it is the only one. The cultivator, recognizing the ancestor and returning to the ancestor, is the most important thing. Just like the Qingming world, the Taoist officials which line of the master's origin is, even if he has established a lifelong line of Taoism. Cui Dongshan grinned and said, Sir, Xiaoluan has such a good cultivating qualifications staying in Luapa Mountain, it seems that there is not much to learn. Long Life smiled and said, I don't think it is necessarily. Wei Wenlong said, Sect Master Siu's words are inappropriate. The old fairy Jia just thought for a moment, and then said a sincere saying on both sides of the Shangshan Xiazong, Pan Dao has been treating Xiaoluan as his own granddaughter all these years. If one girl came to Shindu Mountain to practice, in the end I feel unwilling to give up selfishness. It is really selfishness and selfishness. Chiu Du smiled knowingly when he heard the words, and suddenly felt a little relaxed. The old woman and the blind and unblind Taoist old cast their kind eyes. Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes. Can his mother sell him well with Chiu Du by the way? Old immortal Jia, yes, you can go to the private academy in Yunjing Mountain and become a scholar who specializes in teaching people's affection and sophistication. Because of disagreements regarding Xiaoluan's official master candidate, he still asked Xiaoluan's own wishes in accordance with the old rules of Luapashan. After discussing the candidates for Qingping Jianzong to protect the mountain, Cui Dongshan said that he would hurry up and get it done. At present, the only allies that have formally concluded an alliance with Qingping Jianzong are the Pushun, Tapingshan, and Dequan dynasties for the time being. As for Yu Qzong, of course, it still depends on the husband's personal decision. On the bank of a big lake in Kuezhou, there is a large-scale Xinjia ferry named Juqiandu. Tinkting clouds pass, the lotus is born, the fish and crabs turn over the wild cattails, the sleeping ducks occupy the pidong, and they are startled to disperse and form a pair. In the bustling Xinjia ferry, a man with a burly figure, bowed his head and bowed his waist, quietly approached a young monk who was not short of money, and asked softly, Do you want a robe? The young man's expression moved slightly, and he asked in his heart, What is the way? Is it new? Or the old robe, how new can it be? In fact, this kind of obscure activity is not uncommon in the mountains. They are all products of unknown origin and wrong origin, but the price is much cheaper. The man lifted his chin and said, "You just watch it here. If you see someone you like, tell me that the price is the same, 2 small summer coins." The young monk was stunned by this sentence. The man said, "The seal of the emperor's jewelry is from Huangshalongdi. Ask what the way, don't care who took it off, look back, brother, you wear the same thing on your body. You pick a place tonight. We will pay for the goods with one hand. I will take care to erase all the restrictions on the robe. If you don't worry, you can find an expert to help. Both buyers and sellers are at ease." The young monk said angrily, "Your brain is sick, you get away." The man sighed, "Selling is not righteous, so why do you curse?" The man moved away, apparently looking for the next customer. In a small county on the border between Kuizhou and Qizhou, it is said that a stranger came from a foreign country. He was dressed in a raccoon fur and a crown fox hat. This person is accompanied by 3 retinues, all of whom are chi practitioners. He has neither the status of a court official of a country nor the mountain and water genealogy of the fairy house on the mountain. Only the place and name of his ancestral home and the seal of the local government have checked this disposing of people. Looking at the densely packed seals above, although the local county government felt strange, it was not too conscious. Since it has been able to travel so many places, it must not be the kind of evil person who relies on the immortal arts to make trouble. The group found a place to stay in the city. It is said to be a haunted house where ghosts are often haunted. Yaman's errands are too lazy to take care of it. Even if they don't dare to go to a place at night, they will live in as long as they are willing to live. Inside the house, weeds were overgrown and the windows were leaking. In addition to the stacks of medicine books on the table in the house, there are also piles of bamboo pipes that are cut and grown in different lengths, all with holes. In the small yard, a large water tank was placed, which filled a few fishes caught not long ago and was waiting for the pot. In the small house, the 3 monks, 2 men and 1 woman, who were half followers and half Taoists, all walked all the way to pick them up and brought them with them. They are not low-level, 2 golden pills and 1 dragon gate. They originally had a dojo in their hometown of Yongzhou. They didn't dare to say that they occupied one side and acted as prestige. At least there were even a few friends in the court. But this road is not trembling, after all, it is traveling across the state, especially when I passed through Ruzhou before, I did not go to the Qijin dynasty. I always felt that when I encountered a martial arts style on the road, I would punch to death. This is to blame for the weird person who likes hairpins and give them a fake certificate. In fact, the 3 of them had serious identities earlier and there is no need to change them, but the Qingzero Daoist they have to change to a new one. The reason for their identities is that they disliked their previous names and Dao names, and they got too small, and the meaning was not good enough. As a gash trainer, the Dao name, how big a thing, is the second reincarnation. Therefore, during this journey, the 3 of them wore a false identity and swayed and deceived Daoist Qingling. Can they not panic in their hearts? In their hometown of Yongzhou, they have long heard that there are strangers in a certain county who behave strangely. They wear 3 flowers all the year round without knowing their names, and they can compose poems. They are all gods. Sometimes wearing a splendid red shirt, chatting with Gao Shixian official, sometimes in rags, walking in the market and beggars in the street, most like to say some strange things that no one can explain. I want to cover the bird in the bottle with my hands, and I am afraid of the snake in the well on my 4 feet. Toad light dazzled all day long, eyes full of yellow buds revealed. I never thought I met such a guy and turned out to be a grasshopper on a rope. In response to the old saying, getting on a thief ship is easy to get off. There are 3 women in the house who share tribulations and tribulations. There is a woman with a long slender neck, white as snow. A short man in brocade clothes, his body is as long as he is sideways. He comes from Qingqiao Lake in Longyang County in Yongzhou, but he is a self-proclaimed romantic. Now his name is Wu Lai, who used to call himself a boy without intestines. The last slender man, named Autumn Night, according to Taoist Qingling, means that the night is dark and the moon is bright, and the quiet man is wearing a little Liyue and Mingzhong. He got such a brand new Taoist name inexplicably. He was born in a place where wild snakes were produced in ancient Yongzhou, but there were many snake hunters here, so there are very few people who can practice Taoism. Extravagant hope. Among the snake catchers, the most famous in history is of course the woman who entered the Xuandu temple to practice immortality, Wang Sun, with the Taoist name Empty Mountain, and she is one of the 10 people in the world today. It's just that the 3 of them, 1 goose, 1 snake and 1 crab, still don't know the true identity of that fellow Qingring Taoist. However, they were taught a Taoist book separately, and before the preaching, they were all about the same set of self-boasting and frightening rhetoric. This book will only secretly pass on destined people. Those who dare to divulge my book will be a ghost, a clan and a family according to the law and crime. With a big tone, the three of them each began to practice according to the Taoism, and they seemed to be useless. A long time ago, the Qingling Taoist confidant said that if you only need to persevere in the long run, the emperor will live up to the caring people, and you will always get better. These three dumb Taoists who eat huanglian are currently studying an unknown and heavy book. It is said to be the painstaking work of the old master of Xuanhuan. They are all passed on in this way. It is a pity that Sun Daochang never admits himself. I've written this book. It is really a must-have for mountain and wild repairs to walk the rivers and lakes and seek good fortune and avoid evil. Rumor has it that there is a picture of searching mountains in Hauran, so this book is also called Xiaoshuishu. This book is almost at any Xinjia ferry crossing. They are all sold, and the price is not expensive, just 2 or 3 snowflakes. The words are concise, the entries are clear, and they are divided into categories. They are all old and respectable golden and good words, and they also introduce the customs of the 14 states in the world. What is the style of those monstrous fairy houses and Taoist temples? Which old are stigmatizing goods for the old and disrespectful? And which little are the upper beams are not straight and the lower beams are crooked, and which things you can stop talking about? If you are reasonable, what are not to provoke, you must hide, you really can't hide, you really have encountered something, you know the identity of the other person, just bow your head and admit your mistakes, don't admit the truth. There are also many short stories similar to ghosts and anecdotes, especially well written, which makes people read with gusto. It is worthy of being Sun Guanzhu, who has made friends all over the world, and he really deserves a compliment of consummate merit. The 3 geniuses, Shanzhua Yeshio, were there to learn from each other, digging out the words. After discussing, if you are lucky enough to meet the old master Sun, who is rumored to be the most amiable and amiable to the younger generation on the mountain, what should I say? High morals, or high morals. The 3 fellow Taoists, each holding their own opinions, all have their own reasons. One said that Dao Chang's son was famous and he called it the most suitable name. One said that the old master was a Taoist priest in the end, so he had to have a word for Taoism. Another said that he was old and meant to live a long time, which in itself was the greatest praise. The old Guanzhu did not rush to the door. He stood outside the house, stroking his beard and smiling. He heard good things about him face to face. Most of them were spoofed and slapped, but the praise behind him was mostly out of his sincerity. Yanzhua listened to the debate of the 3 Taoists outside the door, only to feel that the road under their feet had widened. I just didn't know these 3, I really saw the old view masters around me and I couldn't recognize it. It's probably difficult. In the Qingming world, except for a few states, for some reason from the imperial court to the sect, the public use of mirror flowers and water moon in Taoist temples has been forbidden since ancient times. The intestine Sun raised his head suddenly and said in a deep voice, "The Taoist has stopped in broad daylight. How can you break into the house privately? Are you really a vegetarian? Is this really your home?" I saw an old Taoist leader appeared outside the door with a fat young man and 2 brothers, noisily crossing the threshold. Seeing that the old Taoist still crossed the threshold, walked into the house and picked up a handwritten medicine book. The opening content of the preface of that page is very knowledgeable. He claims that nowadays doctors always like to treat diseases with the king's way. I don't know that the royal way is dry and fierce, and if the medication is not careful, it will increase other diseases. Therefore we will treat the royal way purely with hegemony. Harmful. Because he knew the true identity of the person who compiled the book, Sun Daochang didn't think that the other party had confused the word Wangba. Wu Lai, who stopped fruitlessly, couldn't help muttering in a low voice, "Why can't I understand human words?" Yanzhua began to look forward to the scene of this fellow Taoist sweeping the floor in Shendu Temple. I saw the old Taoist master put down his book and glanced at Wu Lai. He saw that he liked arty, with a pile of jade pendants and sachets hanging from his waist. He smiled and joked, "This little brother be a burden. Where's Zhai's stall? Pan Dao will turn around to help you introduce a fellow man." If it is not for going out, and there is a book full of good words on the table, otherwise Wu Lai will yell at him and I have to reply, "Do you want this uncle to send you to see your ancestor?" Bamboo can be blown no matter how long or short, but you have to cut your ears according to your material. You guys, he has chosen him as a manufacturable material, luck is not bad. Dao Chang's son picked up a piece of bamboo pipe in his hand, weighed 1 or 2 and asked casually, "Where is the hairpin lady who brought you here?" After all, the Dragon Master is a Taoist who has reached the Ascendant Realm twice, and the other party has the intention to hide his traces. It is still a little troublesome to find it. Besides, Sun Huaizhong didn't even think about it. The three looked at each other and they were all a little suspicious. Could it be that Qing Ling, who is also a teacher and a friend of Taoism, is actually a female cultivator? If it's a man, it's nothing, rough looks, even if the hairpin on his head, it can still gain a reputation as a stranger, but if it's a woman, ugliness is really ugly. Chunshi asked carefully, the old Taoist is asking the whereabouts of Taoist Qingling? Dao Chang's son nodded and said, I just came to him to reminisce about the past. She looked embarrassed, not only was afraid that the other party was the one who came and the bad one would not come, and the enemy would come to the door, but also that the other party was not looking for the fault, but because she had leaked the trace she was later taken revenge by the Qingling Taoist and caused her to eat for nothing. Hang down. As a result, she looked at the two Taoists around her from the corner of her eye, and they both pretended to be deaf and dumb, putting on a posture that it didn't matter to her. Chunshi had to bite the bullet and asked, Old Taoist, since it's a visit, can you report your identity and Taoist name if you are looking for a fellow Qingling Taoist? The veteran said with a smile, No. Wu Lai was completely annoyed but still stubbornly muttered in a low voice, It's so good, so be careful to go out without friends. Dao Chang's son glanced at the window and smiled, Dogs can't change eating shit, but they always think of a lady knocking on the window, either a fox or a ghost. Thinking with your knees, you know that guy, but whenever you encounter this kind of activity that is very likely to die, behave like a ghost, you must yell, Get out of the way and let me come. Many elderly cultivators are two people when they are young and old. That dragon master, however, is a rare ordinary person, always infatuated, just like pretending to be romantic as if he was afraid that others would think he was infatuated. And this other is actually only one person, the person who is infatuated by the infatuated person. Sun Daochang sighed. Long Xinpu, who is actually pitiful, said, The poor way comes from the Xuandu temple in Qizhou next door. Chunshi was stunned when he heard the words, but the autumn night was skeptical. Only that Wu Lai shouted angrily and complained with the two fellow Taoists, What are you doing in a daze? Hurry up, let's kowtow to the old gods together. Yanzhua grinned, but he was so exaggerated when he heard about Shendu Temple. Dao Chang's son waved his hand, Forget it, you are not Taoist priests in Xuandu Temple, and all you meet on the road are Taoists. You kowtow to people casually for no reason in any manner. That autumn night suddenly asked, This old Taoist chief has ever heard of Hongping Hongxian chief who worked at that motu in the ancestral court of Xuanduguan? I heard that Gao Xing went to a certain national Taoist temple in Qizhou a few years ago to be the first. Sun Daochang smiled and shook his head and said, Who? I haven't heard of it. Taoism is a bit big. Maybe Pang Dao has never seen this Hong Xianchang who was born in the same line. But Pang Dao can talk to him when he turns around. After arriving in Yongzhou, how did you become acquainted with fellow Taoists? In a Taoist temple there are 18 heads of the 3 capitals, 5 masters, 8 deacons, and these guys are in charge of a large group of Taoists. What's more, the Xuandu temple is second to none in the world, plus the hundreds of large and small Taoist temples outside of the ancestral court. The entire Qizhou area belongs to the Xuandu temple family. It is just an official Taoist with a degree. Nearly 100,000 people. The vast majority of Taoist officials may not have seen the predominant side in their entire lives. What's more, even Xuanduguan's Patriarch's Hall deliberations, the old masters did not participate every time. About 10 meetings, 2 or 3 times, that's not bad. Qiu Ye's face changed slightly and she smiled, Don't take it seriously, the old chieftain, it's made up by me nonsense. There is no such thing as Hong Xiancheng who was born in the ancient capital of the ancient capital, the Taoist official of the ancient capital, is it me? A gash trainer of this kind can afford to climb high. Yanzhua was a little worried about this guy's fate. There is a widely circulated saying in the Qingming world, which is specially used to advise those who like to talk halfway. It is not only circulated among state officials, but even in the cities and towns of that country. It is known to women and children. The person who was half-talking last time has already sprinkled water in the Xiandu temple to sweep the floor. After all, the Xianduguan's son Taoist, Taoism is high, he is very careful. Anyone who deliberately sold off with this old master of Guanzi, dare to talk halfway, and if he is not careful, he will get an invitation letter to go to Xuanduguan as a guest. As for the so-called invitation letter, it means the old master slaps you into a faint. When he wakes up, he is already lying in an unfamiliar house with buckets, rags, brooms and dustpans on his feet. Dao Chang's son stroked his beard and said with a smile, When the Taoist official of Xuanduguan is so high and unattainable, why don't you know? It's good to be friends with each other. Pang Dao thinks that in the future, it's more than enough to be a master or protect the country in a small country. Yanzhui immediately understood that the Hong Xianchang had entered the eyes of the old master. Because the old master said to see him, he would definitely go to see him. Sun Daochang took out the 3 secret seals of Xiandu Temple from his sleeves and placed them on the table gently. Talking to the 3 Taoist friends is a great meeting ceremony, don't dislike it. Chun Shi and that Chuya looked at each other, and they were afraid to take the purple golden rune that lingered between sword and Dao Qi. Only Wu Lai, courageous, not afraid of death, cowering, carefully picked up the rune, stamped a gatekeeper and thanked the old Taoist chief. Sun Daochang smiled and said, "You read the book on the table in vain. It's okay today. If you encountered a poor Dao, you must be careful in the future. Don't be so mad about money and be careful." Chun Shi asked suddenly, "Dare to ask the old Taoist chief, why do all the talisman in the world like to be stamped with a real person's seal? In the Qingming world, the difference between the talisman and the seal is the difference between the cloud and the mud. The latter is rumored to enable the wearer to go up the mountain and into the water without any taboos, to deter the wounded, all evil spirits to stay away, to go up to the heavens and to speak to the gods." Sun Daochang smiled and said, "The truth is very simple. Taoist Fulua likes to pay attention to the fact that all ghosts and gods in the world are served in India, while Fulua is in the hands of the judge. A real person and a non-judge cannot be a talisman. If a judge does not have the seal of a real person, his talisman can be used. Otherwise, the talisman in the world is always not a fake, it is not effective enough, in short, it is not powerful and it does not hurt to hit people. As for other worlds, why there are big symbols except for the Dragon Tiger Mountain Heavenly Master Mansion, which is unique like that symbol under the mysterious gate. In fact, it is a secret seal from Mr. Sanshan Jiuho in terms of the profound and long-lasting origins of Taoism. In fact, it is not at all inferior to the Green City of the Great Master by Yujing and the Lingbao City of Pangding. It can even be said to be worse. The 3 of them were taken aback when they heard it. Of course, they had heard of the awe-inspiring Longhushan Heavenly Master's Mansion and the Fulu Yuxuan. Today did we meet someone who speaks louder than Qingling? Old Taoist Master, you have such a verdant city in Lingbao City, especially when you call the old city master Pangding by his name. Are you really afraid of being struck by lightning?" Sun Daochang smiled and said, "Now can I tell Pang Dao, where on earth is your Taoist Qing Zero swaying?" Wu Lai said, "Senior Qingling may be busy fishing at the Jianpu Lake right now. I heard that the sea bass over there tastes the best." Daochang's son nodded, thanked him, pointed to the book on the table and said, "You don't have to be too serious about reading this kind of book, you can throw it away after reading it." Chun Shi shook his head and said, "Daochang's son, this is a good book. In particular, some very short tales of ghosts and monsters with a few hundred words are very interesting." Sun Daochang smiled and said disapprovingly, "That's because you haven't read a really good book. When you read a lot in the future, you will know that your current love is nothing more than a wrong love. It's a waste of time." Wu Lai cautiously reminded, "Old Taoists say this, just relax. I heard that the author of this book, like the old Taoists, they all come from Shendu Guan." Daochang's son smiled and said, "We turn the book readers and scold the book writer a few words. What's the matter? That's a matter for the face. Don't know what is good or bad. The one who writes short stories the most annoying likes to show off skills and is flashy. Especially for those who write long stories. Don't talk about the footwear and the chirping is not easy. Go, this is called idleness. To put it awkwardly, it is to use a shit-stirring stick as a chopstick, pour water into the good wine, and curse a few words. It is all light. If the poor Tao is uncomfortable reading a certain book, just go and arrest the writer to Xuandu Guan, hold a brick and face that guy every day. Let the fellow write well, write carefully, all night." Dan wrote. Pang Dao really did this kind of thing, a few times, of course, believe it or not. The ancients have a cloud, and an ancient book has been written and passed down from generation to generation. The author of a new book, the writing is the great cause of the future. What is a really good book? I turned the book and saw the openness. After reading it, I only felt that my mouth was scented, or I wanted to drink a few sips of wine. In the anxious place, I only feel that my heart is nailed, and it is hard to catch my breath after closing the book. Knowing someone or a certain sentence in the book at first sight, they seem to be in the mountain of books, waiting for a long time. I wait for words and words for me. On the edge of Kampu Lake, a man who had been busy at Jukiandu for a long time and failed to attract customers, returned to the lake with hairpins on his head, and continued fishing with a rod. Business is hard to make money and money is hard to make, and it's really hard to eat a lot of food. The man with the hairpin on his head saw the three people who appeared out of thin air. He immediately stood up and said with a bright smile, "Son Guanju, I haven't seen him for many years. I don't know if he is still such a strong body in a fairy style. What kind of state is it? Why don't you speak up and listen and frighten me?" Sun Daochang sneered and raised one foot, 7 realms. The man glanced at the foot raised by the old Guanju and the other foot, and he sighed in his heart. It was really 14th level. You're tuning in to this sword dance in the vast sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.